Congratulations! You've just opened your eyes in the vibrant heart of Pompeii, a bustling Roman city nestled at the foot of the magnificent Mount Vesuvius. The year is 79 AD, the date October 24th, and the crisp, invigorating air of autumn hints at the pleasant day ahead. Already, the narrow streets are stirring with life, a symphony of sounds and scents, as the eastern sky blushes with the first radiant hues of gold and amber, brushed by the ascending sun. The good news, indeed, is that you find yourself in one of the Roman Empire's most thriving and picturesque urban centers. Pompeii is a place where the sophisticated threads of culture, the robust pulse of commerce, and the easy rhythm of leisure are intricately woven into a rich, colorful tapestry of daily existence. Its prosperity is palpable, its beauty enchanting. The bad news? Well, this particular day, October 24th, is destined not to conclude with the tranquil serenity of its beginning. You are situated within a domus, a modest yet comfortably appointed Roman house, strategically located near the city's vibrant center. This residence belongs to the Lucretius family, a respectable and industrious middle-class merchant household. As you step into the atrium, the spacious central courtyard that serves as the heart of the home, your gaze is drawn upward. Shafts of pristine morning light stream down through the compluvium, a cleverly designed rectangular opening in the roof, not only illuminating the space, but also inviting in the refreshing autumnal air and, on rainy days, collecting precious rainwater. Directly beneath it, the impluvium, a shallow, elegant pool, glistens, silently performing its vital function of collecting and channeling this rainwater for household use. The early morning hush within the domus is unexpectedly peaceful, a calm before the storm, both literally and figuratively. Yet, even in this tranquility, there's an unmistakable undercurrent of activity. Household slaves move with practiced efficiency, their soft footsteps echoing faintly on the mosaic floors as they prepare for the day's demands. One meticulously sweeps the intricate geometric patterns of the pavimentum with careful, rhythmic strokes, coaxing dust and debris from between the tesserae. Another is diligently filling small clay lamps with rich olive oil, ensuring illumination for the coming evening hours. A tantalizing aroma of freshly baked bread, earthy and warm, wafts from the culina, the kitchen, where the household cook is already engrossed in preparing the morning meal. Presently, the paterfamilias, Marcus Lucretius, a man in the prime of his middle years, emerges from his cubiculum, his sleeping chamber. He is dressed simply in a practical tunic, his formal toga not yet donned for the public sphere. With a customary nod to the busy slaves, a silent acknowledgement of their service, he makes his way to a small, unassuming shrine tucked into a corner of the atrium. This is the lararium, a sacred space where diminutive, often vibrantly painted, statues of the Lares, household gods, and the pompeiis, gods of the larder, stand watch. Marcus takes a small, fragrant incense stick, lights its tip, and as a tendril of aromatic smoke curls upward, he offers a brief, heartfelt prayer for the protection and prosperity of his family and home. Another day of opportunity, he murmurs, his voice barely a whisper, imbued with a quiet sense of hope and purpose. He remains blissfully unaware that the very prayers for protection he has just uttered will be tested, not merely metaphorically, but with a severity and finality far beyond his wildest imagination, long before the sun makes its descent below the western horizon. You follow Marcus as he proceeds to the triclinium, the dining room, where he settles down for his morning meal. Breakfast, for the Romans, is a modest affair, largely utilitarian. His plate holds a few slices of robust bread, a small wedge of cheese, a handful of briny olives, and a cup of watered-down wine, a staple refreshment. There's no elaborate fuss or grand spread. Roman appetites are wisely reserved for the more substantial main meal enjoyed later in the day. As Marcus begins to eat, his wife, Livia, joins him, her presence adding a gentle warmth to the room. With them are their two children, Quintus, a sturdy boy of 15, already possessing a nascent sense of responsibility, and Julia, a bright-eyed girl of 12, still embodying youthful innocence. The family exchanges pleasantries, the small talk punctuated by the clinking of pottery and the quiet chewing of bread. They discuss the day's unfolding plans. Quintus, as is customary for a son of his age and station, will accompany his father to the forum, where he will observe and slowly begin to absorb the intricate workings of the family's merchant business. Julia, in turn, will remain with her mother, learning the crucial domestic arts of weaving and household management, preparing for her future role as a Roman matron. The tremors kept me awake again last night, Livia mentions casually, her fingers gracefully breaking off a piece of bread, her tone suggesting a mild, recurring annoyance rather than genuine alarm. That's the fourth night this week. Marcus shrugs, seemingly unconcerned, a gesture that speaks volumes about the collective complacency of Pompeii's residents. The mountain always grumbles, he replies with a dismissive wave of his hand. Remember the big quake 17 years ago? We rebuilt then, stronger than before, and life continued. These small tremors are nothing to worry about. Oh, if only he knew. The dramatic irony hangs heavy in the air, a silent, chilling prophecy. Stepping out with Marcus and Quintus as they depart for the forum, you are immediately enveloped by the vibrant energy of Pompeii's streets. The city has truly awoken, its pulse strong and steady, a testament to centuries of Roman ingenuity and vitality. Shopkeepers are in the midst of opening their establishments, their wooden shutters being pushed back with a characteristic creak and thud, revealing counters abundantly laden with an array of goods. Street vendors, their voices robust and practiced, call out their wares. The crisp freshness of seasonal produce, the inviting warmth of hot food, and a colorful variety of everyday necessities and luxuries. The streets themselves are a marvel of ancient urban planning, captivating to a modern eye. Large, elevated stepping stones are strategically placed at regular intervals across the roadways, serving as convenient pedestrian crossings. These allow citizens to navigate the thoroughfares without having to step into the street itself, which, in a city of this era, frequently contained animal waste, refuse, and spilled goods. Wheeled traffic, predominantly carts drawn by sturdy mules or oxen, must artfully maneuver around these stones, their wheels fitting neatly into the deeply worn grooves carved into the pavement by generations of passage. You cannot help but admire the meticulous planning of the city, with its efficient grid-like street layout, a testament to Roman engineering and organization. Pompeii, in many respects, is remarkably advanced for its time. It boasts an impressively efficient water system, a network of terracotta pipes bringing fresh, potable water directly from the nearby Aqua Augusta aqueduct to numerous public fountains distributed. The crisp morning air of October 24, 79 AD, clung to you with a deceptive autumnal embrace as you stirred, blinking away the last vestiges of sleep. You had just awoken in Pompeii, a jewel of a city nestled beneath the watchful gaze of Mount Vesuvius, a presence so familiar, so seemingly benign, that its true nature remained shrouded in comfortable myth. The city was already humming with the vibrant pulse of Roman life, the eastern sky painted in soft hues of gold and amber as the sun began its ascent. Indeed, you found yourself in one of the most flourishing urban centers of the Roman Empire, a place where the threads of culture, commerce, and leisure were intricately woven into a magnificent tapestry of daily existence. But a sinister undercurrent rippled beneath this idyllic scene, a whispered warning of a day that would end not in peace, but in unparalleled terror. You were within the walls of a domus, a Roman house of modest yet undeniable comfort, belonging to a respected merchant family. As you stepped into the atrium, the central courtyard, the morning light streamed through the compluvium, an ingenious opening in the roof designed to welcome both sunshine and rainwater. Beneath it, the impluvium, a shallow pool, shimmered, collecting the precious water for household use. The early hour held a surprising tranquility, yet the house itself was already a hive of quiet activity. Slaves moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for the day ahead. One, a young woman with nimble fingers, carefully swept the intricate mosaic floor, while another meticulously filled clay lamps with olive oil, ready for the evening's descent. The enticing aroma of freshly baked bread wafted from the culinary, the kitchen, where a cook was already at work, orchestrating the morning meal. Marcus Lucretius, the paterfamilias and head of this household, a man in the prime of his middle years, emerged from his cubiculum, his sleeping chamber. He wore a simple tunic, his formal toga reserved for public appearances later in the day. With a brief, almost imperceptible nod to the slaves, he made his way to the lararium, a small shrine tucked into a corner of the atrium, where the diminutive statues of the household gods stood sentinel. Marcus lit a stick of fragrant incense, its smoke curling upwards, and murmured a brief prayer for protection and prosperity. Another day of opportunity, he whispered to himself, a sentiment steeped in profound irony, utterly unaware that his fervent pleas for divine protection would soon be tested in ways more horrific than his imagination could possibly conceive. You followed Marcus as he settled into the triclinium, the dining room, for his morning meal. Breakfast, a frugal affair for most Romans who reserved their appetites for the day's main repast, consisted of humble bread, a slice of cheese, a handful of olives, and diluted wine. As Marcus ate, his wife, Livia, joined him, their 2 children in tow. Quintus, a strapping boy of 15, and Julia, a vivacious girl of 12. The family exchanged pleasantries, their voices soft against the waking city's distant hum, discussing the day's agenda. Quintus, eager to learn the family trade, would accompany his father to the bustling forum, while Julia would remain with her mother, honing her skills in weaving and household management. "The tremors kept me awake again last night," Livia remarked casually, breaking off a piece of bread, a faint line of worry creasing her brow. "That's the 4th night this week." Marcus, seemingly unperturbed, merely shrugged. "The mountain always grumbles, my dear. Do you not remember the great quake 17 years ago? We rebuilt then, and life continued. These small tremors are nothing to concern ourselves with." If only he knew. You stepped out with Marcus and Quintus into the burgeoning life of Pompeii. The streets were already teeming, the city fully awakened, its pulse strong and steady. Shopkeepers were throwing open their establishments, the clatter of wooden shutters revealing counters laden with an array of goods. Street vendors, their voices a melodic chorus, advertised fresh produce, piping hot food, and countless wares. The streets themselves were a marvel of pragmatic engineering for the time. Large stepping stones, strategically placed at regular intervals, allowed pedestrians to cross the roadways without treading into the often unpleasant mix of animal waste and garbage. Wheeled traffic, mostly carts drawn by patient mules or oxen, navigated around these stones, their heavy wheels fitting into the worn grooves that crisscrossed the pavement. You couldn't help but admire the meticulous grid-like layout, a testament to thoughtful urban planning. Pompeii boasted a remarkably advanced and efficient water system, funneling fresh water from the distant mountains to public fountains scattered throughout the city. You passed one such fountain, where citizens gathered with their clay jugs, exchanging not just water but the latest gossip, their casual chatter oblivious to the fate that awaited them. "Did you feel the earth move again last night?" one woman inquired of another, her voice light. "Yes, but my husband slept right through it," the other replied with a laugh. "He says Vesuvius is just reminding us who's in charge." The mundane conversation continued, their laughter echoing as they filled their vessels, utterly unaware of the mountain's true, terrifying reminder that day. Marcus and Quintus made their way to the Forum, the vibrant, beating heart of Pompeii. This expansive open plaza was encircled by the city's most significant structures, majestic temples, austere government offices, and the grand basilica where legal matters were deliberated. The Forum was already a whirlwind of activity. Merchants haggled animatedly with customers, their voices rising and falling in a rhythmic chant. Politicians engaged in earnest discussions of state affairs, while ordinary citizens went about their daily business, or simply reveled in the rich social atmosphere. And above it all, Mount Vesuvius loomed, its conical peak a constant, majestic presence in the lives of Pompeii's inhabitants. For generations, the volcano had been dormant, its fertile slopes carpeted with vineyards that yielded some of the finest wines in the entire empire. The people had grown comfortably complacent in its shadow, never for a moment imagining the colossal, destructive power that lay slumbering within. As the morning progressed, you observed various citizens as they went about their daily routines, catching intimate glimpses into different facets of Pompeian life. A wealthy patrician woman, accompanied by her retinue of female slaves, visited the public baths, partaking in the elaborate Roman bathing ritual. They moved from the tepidarium, the warm room, to the steam-filled calidarium, and finally to the invigorating frigidarium, the cold room. The baths were more than mere centers of hygiene. They were bustling social hubs where women exchanged gossip, debated politics, and solidified business connections. "I've commissioned a new fresco for my garden wall," the patrician woman confided to her companion as they relaxed in the tepidarium, the humid air clinging to their skin. "The artist is charging an absolute fortune, but my husband just made a killing in the wine trade, so let him complain." Elsewhere, you observed a boisterous group of men in a thermopolium, a popular fast food establishment. These eateries featured L-shaped counters with large earthenware jars, known as dolia, embedded within them, containing hot food and drink. The men stood at the counter, savoring a quick meal of fish stew and bread, washing it down with generous draughts of wine. The thermopolium owner, a jovial man with a booming laugh, chatted amiably with his customers, discussing the eagerly anticipated gladiatorial games scheduled for the following week. On the vibrant walls, colorful frescoes depicted various delectable food items, proudly advertising the house's specialties. "My cousin is fighting in the games," one patron boasted, thumping his chest. "He's been training for months, says he'll dedicate his victory to Venus, the patron goddess of Pompeii." As midday approached, the streets swelled with even more people. Children chased each other, playing games with nuts and small stones, their laughter ringing freely. Stray dogs weaved deftly between pedestrians, their tails wagging hopefully for discarded scraps. The air itself was a symphony of urban life. The rhythmic hammering from carpenter shops, the incessant calls of vendors hawking their wares, the hearty laughter spilling from taverns, and the occasional, plaintive braying of a donkey. You returned to the forum, where Marcus was engrossed in business, trading fine textiles imported from the distant eastern provinces of the empire. Quintus watched intently, absorbing every detail, occasionally running errands for his father or delivering messages to various business associates. The boy was bright and eager, his aspirations clearly set on inheriting the family business one day. It was close to the 6th hour, around noon by our modern reckoning, when the first undeniable sign of trouble manifested. A slight, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the ground, causing cups to rattle on tables and hangings to sway gently from walls. Most people barely reacted. Minor earthquakes were an unwelcome but common occurrence in this volcanic region. However, this tremor was swiftly followed by another, slightly stronger one, prompting a few uneasy glances toward Mount Vesuvius. For the first time, you noticed a subtle change in the mountain's appearance, a thin wisp of dark smoke, barely discernible, rising lazily from its peak. It was so subtle that most people had yet to register it. An old man, his face a roadmap of weathered lines, pointed a trembling finger at the smoke. "The mountain is breathing heavily today," he murmured to no one in particular, a note of genuine concern now present in his voice, a stark contrast to the casual mentions of tremors earlier that morning. Marcus noticed it too, pausing mid-transaction. "Perhaps we should conclude our business quickly today," he said to his trading partner, his voice betraying a hint of unease. "I want to check on my family." As if responding to the burgeoning concern, a deeper, more guttural rumble emanated from the mountain, and the ground trembled more noticeably, rattling the very stones beneath your feet. Now, people were truly beginning to pay attention. Conversations abruptly ceased, and heads collectively turned toward Vesuvius. The thin wisp of smoke had thickened and darkened, morphing into an ominous plume that crawled slowly towards the heavens. Something was unequivocally happening. In the streets, the mood shifted dramatically. The casual bustle of earlier gave way to an edge of palpable uncertainty. Parents instinctively pulled their children closer, their hands gripping small fingers tightly, while merchants began to hastily secure their goods, a nervous energy propelling their movements. No one was panicking yet. After all, the mountain had grumbled countless times before. But there was an undeniable, growing sense that something profoundly unusual and potentially dangerous was unfolding. You followed Marcus and Quintus as they hurriedly made their way back towards their domus. The streets, once merely busy, were now becoming increasingly crowded, a burgeoning tide of citizens, their faces etched with newfound worry, also deciding to return to their families. The tremors continued, increasing in both frequency and strength, each jolt more unnerving than the last. By the time they reached their home, a thick, dark cloud of smoke was unequivocally visible above the mountain, a malevolent cap silhouetted against the sky. Livia and Julia were in the atrium, their faces pale and their eyes wide with fear. "What's happening?" Livia asked, her voice trembling, as soon as her husband and son entered. "I'm not sure," Marcus replied, attempting to project a calm he did not feel. "But I think we should prepare to leave the city, just as a precaution." As the family began to hastily gather what valuables and necessities they could, a tremendous, earth-shattering roar ripped through the air, so loud it seemed to shake the very foundations of the world. Everyone froze, their eyes wide with terror, their breath catching in their throats. You rushed to the doorway, compelled by a morbid curiosity, and looked toward Vesuvius. What you saw turned your blood to ice. The mountain's top had not merely erupted, it had seemingly exploded, a massive column of black smoke, ash, and fire now shooting thousands of feet into the sky. The column rose higher and higher, then began to spread outward at the top, forming a colossal, monstrous pine tree shape, its canopy blotting out the sun. As the family joined you at the door, their faces ghostly pale with abject fear, the first pieces of pumice, light, porous volcanic rock, began to fall from the sky. They were small at first, no bigger than coins, pattering on the roof with a sound like hail. "Grab only what you can carry," Marcus ordered, his voice tight with an urgency that sliced through the panic. "We need to leave now." The family, galvanized by the immediate danger, frantically rushed to gather their most precious possessions, a small chest of coins, a few pieces of jewelry, a handful of cherished family heirlooms. The household slaves were instructed to take essential supplies, their movements swift and desperate. Outside, the streets were no longer merely crowded. They were a maelstrom of panicked citizens, a terrifying crush of humanity. The falling pumice was growing larger, some pieces now the size of a man's fist, causing painful injuries as they struck people. The sky, which had been bright and azure just hours before, had darkened to an ominous, suffocating gray-black, as if night had descended at midday. Marcus, his face grim with determination, led his family toward the harbor, clutching onto the desperate hope of escaping by sea. Thousands of others had the same idea, creating an almost impenetrable tide of humanity flowing through the city's narrow streets. The air was becoming increasingly difficult to breathe, thick with swirling ash and acrid, sulfurous fumes that stung the eyes and burned the throat. "Cover your mouths with cloth," Marcus shouted over the din, tearing a strip from his own tunic for Julia to use. "Breathe through it." The falling debris grew heavier and more dangerous. Buildings, once sturdy and proud, were beginning to groan and collapse under the immense weight accumulating on their roofs. The once orderly streets had become perilous obstacle courses of fallen masonry, abandoned possessions, and in some tragic cases, the unmoving bodies of those who had already succumbed to the mountain's wrath. As you followed the desperate family through the choking, unnatural darkness, witnessing the terrifying genesis of one of history's most infamous natural disasters, you couldn't help but wonder how many would escape, and how many, like the city itself, would be frozen in time by the mountain's unparalleled fury. The rhythmic falling of the pumice created an almost hypnotic, terrifying backdrop to the unfolding catastrophe. Tap, tap, tap on the stone streets. Crack, snap, rumble as structures gave way under the strain. And through it all, the distant, continuous roar of the volcano, a primal sound like some ancient, enraged god awakened from slumber and unleashing its wrath upon the mortal world. As Marcus and his family fought their way through the panicked crowds toward the distant harbor, the blanket of ash grew thicker, the air harder to breathe with every desperate gasp. The once vibrant, colorful city of Pompeii was being slowly but inexorably erased, covered in a shroud of gray that would preserve it, a macabre time capsule, for centuries to come. And as we leave the Lucretius family, struggling for their lives in the growing darkness, we are starkly reminded of how quickly our world can change, how an ordinary day that began with breakfast and business can transform, in an instant, into a desperate struggle for mere survival. The people of Pompeii woke that morning, never imagining they would become a poignant time capsule for future generations, their final moments preserved in ash, their daily lives frozen at the very instant Vesuvius reclaimed the land in its shadow. The relentless patter of pumice continued, a soft rain that gradually built in intensity to a deafening drumbeat. The family huddled closer together, their faces etched with a primal fear, yet their eyes shone with a fierce determination to survive. The harbor, their imagined sanctuary, still lay far ahead, and the path grew more treacherous with each passing moment, obscured by ash and debris. But they pressed on, step by difficult step, into a future none of them could have possibly imagined when they had greeted the morning sun just hours before. The Lucretius family pushed forward through streets that grew more unrecognizable by the minute. The elegant city of Pompeii, with its orderly grid of streets and beautiful frescoes, was rapidly transforming into a desolate, gray wasteland. Ash coated everything, thick and suffocating, like a winter snowfall. But this was no gentle snowscape. This powder burned the lungs, stung the eyes, and suffocated hope. "Stay close." Marcus bellowed over his shoulder, his voice hoarse, gripping Quintus by one hand and Livia by the other, his family a human chain against the encroaching chaos. Julia clutched her mother's hand, her young face a mask of pure terror, partially hidden by the ash-dusted cloth covering her mouth and nose. Behind them followed two household slaves, their loyalty unwavering, carrying bundles of essential supplies, their own faces grim. The falling pumice had become a constant danger, the pieces growing steadily larger. Some were now the size of small fruits, and they fell with enough force to cause serious injury, thudding ominously as they struck the ground or unfortunate passers-by. All around them, people desperately covered their heads with pillows, wooden boards, or anything else they could find to protect themselves from the brutal bombardment. A man stumbled past, blood streaming from a ragged wound on his forehead where a chunk of pumice had struck him. "The harbor is chaos," he gasped, his voice raspy, before continuing his flight in another direction. "Better to head for the hills." Marcus hesitated, uncertainty momentarily clouding his face. The family had been making for the harbor, clinging to the slim hope of escaping by sea, but now doubt, a cold creeping tendril, began to insinuate itself. Was that still the best option? He looked around at the frightened faces of his family, their expressions barely visible in the unnatural twilight that had descended upon the city. "What should we do, Father?" Quintus asked, his voice remarkably steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. At 15, he was trying hard to show courage, to be the man he had been raised to become. Before Marcus could answer, a tremendous crash sounded nearby as the roof of a shop, unable to bear the colossal weight of accumulated pumice and ash, finally gave way. The ground shuddered again, another earthquake, one of dozens that had rippled through the city since the eruption began. "We continue to the harbor," Marcus decided firmly, his resolve returning. "At least there we have a chance of getting away from the mountain." The family pressed on through streets that grew increasingly difficult to navigate. The ash was now ankle-deep in places, like treading through soft sand, each step a struggle. Buildings that had stood for generations were beginning to fail, their roofs caving in, walls cracking from the repeated tremors and the sheer, relentless weight bearing down on them. You followed close behind the family, a silent observer witnessing their desperate struggle and that of countless others around them. The city's population flowed like panicked rivers through the darkening streets, some still determinedly pushing toward the harbor, others, changing tack, streaming toward the gates leading inland. In the growing darkness, faces appeared and disappeared, briefly illuminated by flashes of distant lightning, etched with terror, desperation, and in some cases, a haunting, almost peaceful resignation. Near the majestic temple of Apollo, you spotted an elderly priest, his white robes billowing in the ash-filled wind, standing defiantly in the open forum, arms raised to the blackened sky. Appease the gods, he cried to anyone who would listen. Make offerings. Pray for mercy. A few frightened citizens had gathered around him, kneeling in the ash, their lips moving in desperate, unheard prayers. As you watched, a large piece of pumice struck the old priest on the shoulder, sending him sprawling. His followers, their faith perhaps momentarily shaken but not broken, helped him to his feet, and they retreated into the relative, if illusory, safety of the temple's shadowed portico. Through the thickening, apocalyptic haze, you caught fleeting glimpses of different scenes playing out across the city. A young mother wrapped her infant in layers of cloth to protect it from the falling debris, then continued her frantic flight, with the tiny baby cradled against her chest. A group of men broke into an abandoned villa, their eyes gleaming, looking for valuables left behind in the hasty evacuation. A dog ran frantically through the streets, barking mournfully, searching desperately for its master. At the House of the Faun, one of the largest and most luxurious homes in Pompeii, you saw the wealthy owner, a corpulent man, directing his numerous slaves to carry chests of valuables. Quickly, he shouted, his voice hoarse with exertion. To my ships. I have vessels waiting at the harbor. Meanwhile, the Lucretius family had reached the busy thoroughfare of Via dell'Abbondanza. Normally the bustling commercial heart of Pompeii, it was now a corridor of primal fear, choked with fleeing citizens. The shops that lined the street, bakeries, wineries, textile merchants, and food stalls, stood abandoned, some with their goods still displayed, frozen moments of ordinary life violently interrupted by disaster. The air had grown impossibly thicker, harder to breathe. It wasn't just ash now, but also toxic, noxious fumes seeping up from beneath the earth, stinging the nostrils and constricting the lungs. People all around you were coughing uncontrollably, some collapsing to their knees, struggling desperately for air, their faces turning blue. Cover your faces tighter, Marcus instructed his family. His own breathing labored. Breathe through the cloth. Julia stumbled, nearly falling in the deepening ash. One of the slaves, a powerfully built man named Titus, who had been with the family for years, scooped her up without breaking stride. "I've got you, little mistress," he said, his own breathing ragged, but his dedication unwavering, a silent testament to bonds that transcended social strata. The group paused briefly in the relative shelter of a portico, leaning against a cool, stone column, to catch their breath. The scene around them was truly apocalyptic. The sky had darkened to a deep, unnatural black gray, with only the occasional, blinding flash of lightning from the eruption column providing brief, ghostly illumination, revealing the horror for split seconds. The continuous rain of pumice and ash created a persistent, terrifying patter, like thousands of impatient fingers drumming incessantly on every available surface. Livia clutched Marcus's arm, her knuckles white. "The children," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the relentless rumbling of the mountain and the sounds of escalating panic around them. "We must think of the children. Are we making the right choice?" Before Marcus could answer, a man staggered toward them through the ash-filled portico. You recognized him as Numerius Pompeius, a prominent citizen and a longtime friend of the family. Marcus, he called, his voice raspy from the ash and fear. Don't go to the harbor. I've just come from there. The sea has withdrawn hundreds of feet from the shore. Ships are stranded in the mud, and the waves, when they return. He made a violent, crashing gesture with his hands. Some vessels have already been swamped. This was grim news indeed. When the sea retreated dramatically, it often returned with devastating, tsunami-like force, a phenomenon understood even in ancient times. The harbor, their last desperate hope, might not be the sanctuary they had envisioned. What are you going to do? Marcus asked his friend. My family has taken shelter in the cellar of my country villa outside the city walls. Numerius replied, his eyes bloodshot. I came back to help others. The stone buildings are strongest. Some may survive if the roofs don't collapse from the weight. As if to emphasize his dire point, another tremor shook the ground, and more pumice rained down heavily around the portico. A section of cornice broke free from the building across the street, crashing into the ash-covered ground with a muffled thud. Marcus looked at his family, his wife's frightened face, his son's determined expression, his daughter held safely in the arms of their loyal slave. The decision weighed heavily on him, a crushing burden in the choking air. Continue to the uncertain harbor? Try to flee inland, towards the treacherous, ash-choked roads? Or seek shelter and wait out the mountain's fury? We'll head for the Villa of the Mysteries, he decided finally, his voice firm with renewed purpose, naming a large, renowned estate on the northwestern outskirts of the city. My friend Lucius owns it. The buildings are strong, and it's far enough from the Forum that there will be fewer people seeking refuge there. Numerius nodded in agreement, a flicker of hope in his eyes. A wise choice, Marcus. The villa has thick walls and strong rooms. If any building survives this, it might be one like that. With their new, perilous destination decided, the family moved out from the temporary shelter of the portico. The going was even more difficult now. The ash was knee-deep in places, and the continuous, hammering rain of pumice had created treacherous piles of debris, making every step a gamble. They were forced to detour several times, navigating around collapsed buildings or streets made utterly impassable by rubble and fallen structures. As they navigated through what was once the vibrant, colorful heart of Pompeii, you noticed how the familiar landmarks of the city were being steadily erased, covered in the uniform gray shroud that had descended from Vesuvius. The vibrant, colorful wall paintings that adorned so many buildings, the ubiquitous street-side shrines to household gods, the bold political graffiti scrawled on walls, all were gradually disappearing, buried under the relentless layers of volcanic ash. The evacuation had become more desperate now, the mood growing increasingly frantic. Those who had delayed leaving were frantically trying to make up for lost time, pushing forward with a raw, primal urgency. An overloaded cart had tipped over at a corner, spilling a family's meager possessions across the ash-strewn street. The owner tried vainly to salvage what he could, his hands trembling, while simultaneously urging his wife and children to continue on foot. "Leave it all," he shouted when his wife, weeping, tried to help him. "Just go, go." The human drama unfolding around you was both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. Acts of callous selfishness occurred alongside moments of extraordinary heroism and sacrifice. A man abandoned an elderly woman, presumably his mother, when she could no longer keep up with his desperate pace. Moments later, a complete stranger stopped to help the struggling woman, half carrying her despite the immense danger to himself, his only motivation a flicker of human compassion amidst the apocalypse. Through it all, Mount Vesuvius continued its terrifying assault. The roaring from its maw had not diminished. If anything, it had grown louder, a constant, deafening reminder of the unstoppable natural force being unleashed. The eruption column now rose miles into the sky, spreading outward at its peak to form what modern volcanologists would recognize as a classic pine tree shape, wide and menacing at the top, narrowing to the trunk-like column rising directly from the volcano's crater. As the Lucretius family made their arduous way toward the northwestern edge of the city, heading for the distant Villa of the Mysteries, the very nature of the eruption began to change. The continuous, deadly rain of pumice and ash was bad enough, a terrifying constant, but something far, far worse was now brewing. You noticed, at first, a strange, low-lying cloud forming on the lower slopes of the mountain, different from the towering column above. This cloud was hugging the ground, moving with terrifying, silent speed down the mountainside, directly toward the doomed city. It was a darkness unlike any night, unnatural and suffocating, roaring with the fury of internal lightning, consuming everything in its path. This was the first pyroclastic surge, a superheated avalanche of gas, ash, and incandescent rock fragments. A force of nature moving at impossible speeds, often hundreds of miles per hour, and reaching temperatures that could instantly incinerate flesh, hundreds of degrees Fahrenheit. This was the eruption's deadliest phase, the one destined to claim the vast majority of lives in Pompeii. No one in the ancient world possessed the vocabulary or scientific understanding to name such a monstrous phenomenon. For the Pompeians, it was simply an approaching terror, something new and utterly incomprehensible, far more dangerous than anything they had endured so far. Look at that. Quintus's voice was a ragged whisper, his young face bleached bone-white with primal fear as he pointed a trembling hand toward the mountain. The ground-hugging cloud surged forward with terrifying, silent speed, a malevolent shadow swallowing the familiar countryside between the volcano and the city. Fields, olive groves, scattered farmhouses, all vanished beneath its inky expanse. Those who had fled inland mere moments earlier may already have been engulfed, their desperate escape rendered tragically futile. "Run!" Marcus roared, his voice raw with urgency. He roughly pulled Julia from Titus's grasp, then shoved his family forward with desperate strength. "We must reach the villa now." Their pace quickened from a frantic trot to a desperate sprint, their feet slipping and sliding on the accumulating ash that now coated the road. All around them, a horrifying symphony of screams and desperate shouts erupted as others, too, spotted the encroaching cloud. It became a mass exodus, a stampede driven by nothing but pure, unadulterated survival instinct. Just ahead, through the ash-choked air, the faint red walls of the Villa of the Mysteries emerged, a beacon of fragile hope. This grand estate, one of the most magnificent private homes in the region, was famous for its exquisite frescoes depicting mysterious ritual ceremonies, a vibrant testament to a bygone world of culture and secrets. It lay just beyond the Herculaneum Gate, on the northwestern edge of the city. The Lucretius family was far from alone in their quest for refuge. Dozens of people were already huddled within the villa's peristyle, the central, columned garden, now transformed from a sanctuary of beauty into a crowded haven of last resort. Some were residents of the villa itself, caught unawares, while others were refugees like Marcus's family, strangers united by common terror. Lucius, the villa's owner, a wealthy merchant and an old, esteemed friend of Marcus, greeted them with a face etched with grim relief. "Thank the gods you made it," he rasped, briefly embracing Marcus before turning back to survey the desperate crowd. "We've been taking in as many as we can." Normally, the peristyle would have been an oasis of beauty and tranquility. Elegant columns supporting a shaded portico, surrounding a vibrant garden filled with exotic flowers, classical statues, and the soothing splash of a central fountain. Now, it was a tableau of stark desolation, crammed with frightened people whose gazes were fixed on the sky outside, which grew ever darker, bruised purple and ominous black. The cloud from the mountain, a relentless, living entity, was drawing closer. Marcus gasped, still struggling to catch his breath, his chest burning. "It's coming this way." "I know," Lucius interrupted, his face grave, his eyes reflecting a deep, weary understanding. "We've been watching it. That's why I've instructed everyone to move to the inner rooms, away from the atrium and any entrances. The deeper rooms, those without windows, may offer more protection." As they spoke, a woman stumbled into the peristyle from the direction of the atrium, her face contorted, her hair disheveled. "It's coming," she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "The black cloud is at the walls." A fresh wave of raw panic erupted among the assembled refugees. People surged forward, a desperate tide pushing toward the narrow inner doorways, clawing their way to the perceived safety of the windowless rooms at the villa's heart. In the crush, families were brutally separated. Children cried out for lost parents, and the elderly stumbled, struggling to maintain their footing against the frantic press of bodies. "Stay together," Marcus bellowed, his voice straining above the din. He grabbed Livia's hand, then Quintus's, forming a human chain with their hands linked tightly, desperately holding on. "Don't let go." You follow them, swept along in the panicked current, as they fought their way toward a small, sturdy room, perhaps once a storage area for wine or provisions, its thick stone walls and lack of windows now its greatest asset. It was already crowded, but people, in their shared vulnerability, squeezed tighter, making precious space for the newcomers. Oil lamps, clutched by trembling hands or set precariously on ledges, cast flickering, sickly illumination, painting grotesque, dancing shadows across frightened, ash-streaked faces. The air inside was stale, growing increasingly heavy and difficult to breathe, thick with the exhalations of dozens of terrified people and the fine volcanic ash that clung to their clothes, hair, and even their eyelashes. Outside, the world had gone utterly dark, a profound, absolute blackness that swallowed even the meager, bruised light that had penetrated the ash cloud moments earlier. The steady patter of falling pumice on the villa's roof was now joined by a new, terrifying sound, a deep, rushing roar, growing rapidly louder, more immediate, and utterly deafening. "Get down!" someone screamed, a voice cracking with terror. "Cover your heads." The Lucretius family huddled together in a cramped corner of the room, a desperate, tightly knit knot of fear and love. Marcus wrapped his arms tightly around Livia and Julia, shielding them as much as he could, while Quintus pressed himself fiercely against his father's side. The loyal slaves, Titus and a woman named Drusilla, crouched nearby, their societal distinctions temporarily forgotten in this raw, terrifying moment of shared humanity, facing the imminent grip of death. "I love you all," Marcus said, his voice miraculously steady despite the wide, animal terror glinting in his eyes. "Whatever happens, know that." His words were swallowed by the rushing sound outside, which crescendoed into a deafening, thunderous roar that vibrated through the very stones of the villa. Dust and fine debris shook loose from the ceiling, raining down on the terrified occupants. Some people began to pray aloud, their voices trembling, while others wept openly, soft, despairing sounds lost in the monstrous noise. Many sat in stunned, silent shock, their minds unable to process the horror. Some covered their ears against the unbearable sound, while others simply embraced their loved ones, finding solace in the final, desperate touch. And then it hit. The pyroclastic surge, the very force that would indelibly define Pompeii's fate. The superheated cloud of gas and ash, an invisible, scorching entity, enveloped the villa, relentlessly seeking entry through every crack, every crevice, every tiny opening. Outside, the temperature soared to hundreds of degrees in an instant, a flash furnace that consumed all life. Inside the sturdy, windowless room, the temperature also began its insidious climb, albeit more slowly, thanks to the thick stone walls that offered a brief, fragile insulation. But the air grew hotter by the second. Breathing became an agonizing torment, each inhalation a searing pain as the heated air scorched their lungs. "Breathe through your tunics," Marcus gasped, pressing the coarse fabric of his garment to his mouth, a futile gesture against the inferno. Shallow breaths. The heat continued its relentless, upward spiral. The weaker individuals, the very young, the elderly, those already weakened by the arduous, ash-choked evacuation, began to lose consciousness, their fragile bodies succumbing. The room grew eerily quieter, The deafening roar from outside now dulled to a terrifying rumble, punctuated only by the labored, rasping breaths of the living and the occasional, guttural moans of distress. Julia slumped against her father, her small body going limp, her head lolling. "Julia?" Livia cried out, shaking her daughter's shoulder with frantic urgency. The girl's eyelids fluttered, a brief, butterfly tremor, but her eyes remained closed. "She's just fainted from the heat," Marcus assured his wife, his voice thin, the uncertainty a sharp, agonizing edge beneath his words. "She'll be all right." But outside, the pyroclastic surge showed no signs of abating. If anything, its intensity deepened, a relentless, suffocating embrace. The heat in the room climbed to truly unbearable levels, a torturous, inescapable inferno. One by one, people succumbed to the infernal heat and the insidious, toxic gases seeping in. Their bodies settled into final, petrified postures, some frozen in desperation, others in a futile attempt at protection, many in a quiet, chilling resignation. Marcus pulled his family even closer, their bodies pressed together in one final, desperate embrace. "Close your eyes," he whispered, his voice barely audible, his own consciousness fraying. "Think of cool breezes from the sea. Think of spring flowers in the forum. Think of—" His voice trailed off, a whisper lost as consciousness began its final, irreversible slip away from all of them. The loyal slaves, Titus and Drusilla, in their last conscious moments, reached out to touch the family they had served in life, their hands finding the limbs of Marcus, Livia, and Quintus. All social boundaries, all distinctions of status, erased utterly in their final, shared moments of humanity facing oblivion. Outside, the pyroclastic surge continued its deadly passage over Pompeii, a sweeping wave of destruction that sealed the fate of the city and most of its inhabitants. The ash and pumice continued to fall, a relentless, choking rain, burying structures and bodies beneath its suffocating blanket. It was a macabre, natural process, inadvertently creating the most extraordinary time capsule, destined to preserve this precise, terrible moment for centuries to come. In their fading moments, as consciousness ebbed, the Lucretius family and those around them had no idea that their tragic demise would become a window into Roman life for future generations. They could not conceive that their vibrant city, their homes, their precious possessions, and most tragically, their very bodies, would be preserved in stunning, agonizing detail. A perfect snapshot of a vibrant civilization frozen forever at the moment of its greatest catastrophe. The initial pyroclastic surge passed, its deafening roar gradually receding, but others would inevitably follow. Vesuvius's eruption was far from over. It would continue for many hours, perhaps even days, adding layer upon layer of volcanic material to the deepening shroud covering Pompeii. When it finally ceased its furious exhalation, the city would lie buried beneath meters of ash and pumice, entirely hidden from view, its existence obliterated from the surface of the earth. Its precise location would eventually be forgotten, gradually fading from human memory as new settlements rose nearby, erasing the scars of the past. The rushing sound faded into an eerie, almost unbearable silence, broken only by the softer, ceaseless patter of falling ash. The first surge had passed, leaving in its wake an unspeakable destruction. In the cramped room where the Lucretius family had sought shelter, most had already perished, suffocated by the intense heat and toxic gases. A few stronger individuals, clinging to life with desperate gasps, still breathed, but their fate was sealed by the subsequent surges that would come in relentless waves throughout the eruption. As life ebbed from the last survivors, the ash continued its gentle, inexorable descent, a soft, gray blanket covering the still bodies, filling the rooms, and smoothing over the once sharp contours of the bustling city. It fell silently upon the forum, where merchants had conducted lively business just hours before, now utterly silent. It fell on the grand amphitheater, where gladiators had once fought to the thunderous cheers of thousands, now echoing only with emptiness. It fell on the temples, where fervent prayers had gone unanswered, coating altars and statues in a gray dust. It fell on the public baths, where citizens had once socialized and gossiped, now still and cold. It fell on the bakeries, where loaves of bread still sat in ovens, destined never to be eaten. Pompeii was becoming a ghost city, its vibrant streets empty except for the still bodies of those who couldn't escape, now being gently covered by the volcanic shroud that would preserve them for millennia. The vibrant wall paintings, the hastily scrawled graffiti, the intricate mosaics, all were being sealed away, protected from the ravages of time by the very disaster that had claimed so many lives. In the room where the Lucretius family had made their last stand, the ash began to filter in through tiny cracks and openings, gently coating the huddled bodies. As the organic material of their bodies eventually decayed beneath the hardened ash, they would leave behind hollow impressions, haunting human-shaped voids. Centuries later, archaeologists would meticulously fill these voids with plaster, recreating with chilling fidelity their final moments. The loyal slave Titus still protectively holding his little mistress Julia, Livia and Marcus embracing their son Quintus pressed tightly against them, Drusilla's hand reaching out to touch the family she had served. These postures, frozen in the act of death, would be preserved, a heartbreaking tableau of a family facing the end together, forever immortalized. And so they remained, as the hours turned into days, the days into years, the years into centuries. Pompeii slipped from memory, its location lost to time, swallowed by the earth and the encroaching forest. The eruption faded into legend, a terrifying cautionary tale passed down through generations. And all the while, beneath the fertile soil that would eventually cover the ash, the city waited, its streets, buildings, artifacts, and people perfectly preserved, a moment in history frozen solid by Vesuvius's fury. The gentle rhythm of falling ash continued like a sorrowful lullaby to the dead city. Layer upon layer it built up, creating the extraordinary time capsule that would eventually reveal so much about Roman life. The mountain had reclaimed what stood in its shadow, and in doing so, had paradoxically ensured that Pompeii and its people would never truly be forgotten. As the last ash settled and the mountain finally grew quiet, Pompeii entered a long, silent sleep, waiting for the day centuries in the future when it would be rediscovered, and its story, including that of the Lucretius family, would finally be told. As ash continued its relentless fall over Pompeii, let us shift our gaze across the shimmering expanse of the Bay of Naples to Misenum, where a 17-year-old boy named Gaius Plinius Caecilius Secundus, known to history as Pliny the Younger, was witnessing the unfolding catastrophe from a chilling distance. His vivid account, meticulously penned years later in letters to the illustrious historian Tacitus, would become the only eyewitness record of the eruption to survive into modern times, a priceless window into the past. Young Pliny was residing with his uncle, Pliny the Elder, who commanded the formidable Roman fleet stationed at Misenum. The elder Pliny was not merely a seasoned naval commander. He was also a renowned natural philosopher and prolific author, celebrated for his insatiable curiosity about the natural world. It was early afternoon, a seemingly ordinary day, when Pliny's mother pointed toward the horizon, her voice laced with a touch of perplexity. "Look," she said, gesturing toward a strange cloud rising from the direction of Vesuvius. "What kind of cloud is that?" Pliny and his uncle stepped outside, their scientific curiosity immediately piqued, to observe the phenomenon. What unfolded before their eyes was truly extraordinary. A cloud shaped unlike any they had ever witnessed, defying all natural explanation. Later, in his poignant letter to Tacitus, Pliny the Younger would famously describe it as resembling a pine tree more than any other tree. Like a very tall trunk, it was borne up into the sky and then split into branches. This distinctive pine tree shape, a towering column spreading out at the top, is now universally recognized by volcanologists as the classic form of a Plinian eruption, named, fittingly enough, after Pliny the Elder, who was about to sail directly into its heart. For a time, Uncle and nephew simply observed the unusual cloud with detached scientific curiosity, their minds racing to categorize and understand. They did not yet comprehend the scale of the danger it represented to the thriving communities nestled at the foot of the mountain. But as they watched, the cloud grew inexorably larger and darker, its true, menacing nature becoming terrifyingly apparent. Then, messages began to arrive, relayed by desperate writers, frantic pleas for rescue from terrified friends and acquaintances living perilously close to the volcano. Pliny the Elder, a man driven by both his solemn duty as a naval commander and his boundless scientific curiosity, made a momentous decision. He would launch rescue ships, marshaling the fleet to help evacuate people from the ravaged coastline nearest the eruption. "I'm going to get closer to understand this phenomenon," he told his nephew, his eyes alight with a mixture of determination and intellectual hunger. And to help those in danger. Young Pliny, eager and brave, asked to accompany his uncle, but the elder Pliny firmly refused. "Stay with your mother," he insisted, a rare tremor of concern in his voice. "Continue your studies." This fateful decision would save the younger Pliny's life and, in doing so, ensure that an invaluable eyewitness account of the disaster survived for future generations. As his uncle departed with the fleet, a dramatic and heroic figure sailing into the unknown, young Pliny returned to his studies, attempting to maintain some semblance of normalcy despite the ominous, ever-growing cloud on the horizon. But as the afternoon progressed, the situation at Misenum itself began to rapidly deteriorate. Across the bay, the Lucretius family and others trapped in Pompeii were already fighting for their lives in a desperate, losing battle. But at Misenum, the true danger was only just beginning to become apparent. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble with increasingly violent earthquakes, threatening to bring down buildings. The sea, in an unsettling and unnatural phenomenon, receded strangely from the shore, abandoning marine creatures on the suddenly exposed seabed. Then, most alarmingly, a vast, black cloud, a harbinger of death from the eruption, began to spread across the bay, inexorably heading directly toward them. "We must leave the house," Pliny's mother urged, her voice tight with fear as buildings around them began to shake dangerously. "It isn't safe to stay indoors." They joined a torrent of frightened citizens, a chaotic stream of humanity heading away from the imperiled shoreline and the encroaching black cloud. The sky darkened to an absolute, terrifying pitch black, despite it still being the middle of the day. Pliny would later write that it was not the dark of a moonless night, but as if the lamp had been put out in a closed room, a darkness so profound it felt tangible. Ash began to fall, fine and insidious at first, then larger, abrasive pumice stones. People tied pillows to their heads for meager protection, the same desperate measure being taken by their doomed counterparts in Pompeii. In the terrifying darkness, parents lost children, and friends were separated from each other. The heart-wrenching cries of people searching for loved ones mixed with fervent prayers and desperate lamentations. "Mother," young Pliny said, taking her hand firmly, his voice surprisingly steady, a beacon of maturity in the chaos. "Whatever happens, we stay together." Through the terrifying night, they waited out the disaster, a harrowing vigil, not knowing if they would live to see the morning light, or if his brave uncle would ever return from his perilous rescue mission. He wouldn't. Pliny the Elder would die on the shores near Stabii, likely overcome by the insidious toxic fumes while selflessly trying to help those fleeing by sea. While the younger Pliny and his mother survived their brush with death at Misenum, let us return to Pompeii to witness other stories unfolding in the doomed city, individual fates interwoven with the larger catastrophe. Near the great amphitheater in the southeastern part of the city, a gladiator named Celadus had been training when the eruption began. Known affectionately as the man the girls sigh for, according to the numerous pieces of adoring graffiti found on Pompeii's walls, Celadus was a phenomenally popular fighter, a Thraic-style gladiator who had won numerous bouts, his name synonymous with strength and charisma. The gladiatorial barracks were eerily empty today, Many of his fellow fighters were in Naples for games being held there, a stroke of cruel fortune that saved their lives. When the mountain first erupted, Celadus was in the training yard, meticulously cleaning his equipment, preparing for upcoming matches, a routine chore before the world irrevocably changed. His trainer, an older man named Saturninus, himself once a celebrated gladiator whose own battle scars told tales of past glories, was the first to notice the strange, burgeoning cloud. "Celadus," the old man called, his voice sharp, pointing an unsteady finger toward Vesuvius. "Something's happening at the mountain." The gladiator looked up from polishing his gleaming bronze helmet, his practiced eyes narrowing at the sight. "That's no ordinary cloud," he stated, his voice low, setting aside his work. "I've seen smoke from forest fires in my homeland. This is different, much different." As the gravity of the situation became terrifyingly clear, Celadus faced a profound choice. As a gladiator, he was essentially property, bound by legal and social chains to his lanista, the owner of his troop. Technically, he shouldn't leave without express permission, risking severe punishment or even death. But with ash beginning to fall like a gray snow and panic spreading like wildfire through the city streets, such niceties of ownership suddenly seemed utterly meaningless, swallowed by the sheer terror. "I'm going to help people get out of the city," he declared to Saturninus, his gaze firm, resolute. "Are you coming?" The old trainer, a man of quiet courage, simply nodded. Better to die doing something worthwhile than cowering here like rats. Together, the formidable pair ventured into the increasingly chaotic streets, their powerful builds and the natural authority that emanated from their profession proving invaluable. They began to organize small groups of panicked citizens, their commanding voices cutting through the din, directing them toward the city gates leading away from the volcano's fury. "Cover your heads," Celadus shouted above the growing roar, demonstrating by quickly tying a piece of cloth over his own short-cropped hair. "Stay together. Move quickly, but don't run blindly." For several grueling hours, the gladiator and his trainer worked tirelessly, a testament to their physical prowess and moral fortitude. They helped the elderly who had fallen, carried children whose parents were overburdened, and provided a desperately needed sense of order amid the spiraling chaos. They made multiple, perilous trips to different neighborhoods, guiding groups to relative safety before turning back, without hesitation, for more. But as the pyroclastic surges began to hit the city, even their extraordinary courage and strength proved tragically insufficient against the overwhelming power of nature. Caught in the open during one of their selfless rescue efforts, they had nowhere to hide when the superheated cloud of gas and ash rolled down the narrow streets like a consuming fire. In their final moments, true to their warrior spirit, the gladiator and his trainer stood their ground rather than fleeing, their last actions dedicated to helping others into a sturdy building nearby. They were still ushering the last stragglers to perceived shelter when the surge engulfed them, preserving them forever in poses not of combat, but of profound, selfless compassion. Elsewhere in the city, in the elegant house of the Vetii, two wealthy freedman brothers had a dramatically different experience of the disaster. Aulus Vettius Restitutus and Numerius Vettius Conviva, former slaves who had, through sheer ambition and acumen, built a successful business and risen to considerable prosperity, were renowned for their lavishly decorated home, filled with exquisite frescoes and artwork. When the eruption began, the brothers were hosting a crucial business meeting with several important clients in their opulent triclinium, the dining room where Romans typically conducted business while reclining on sumptuous couches and enjoying fine food and wine. "It's probably nothing serious," Aulus assured his guests, a practiced air of dismissiveness, as the first tremors rattled the cups on the table. "Vesuvius often grumbles, it's nothing more." But as ash began to fall, dust motes dancing in the fading light, and the sky darkened to a bruised twilight, even the ever-optimistic Aulus had to acknowledge the looming danger. The brothers, astute businessmen even in crisis, quickly gathered their most valuable and portable possessions: coins, jewelry, and small, precious items that could be easily carried. Their clients, their faces now pale with alarm, departed hastily to check on their own families. "What about the artwork?" Numerius asked, his gaze sweeping around the room, lingering on the beautiful frescoes that adorned their walls, vibrant scenes of cupids engaged in various trades, likely representing the brothers' successful business interests. "We can't take the walls with us," Aulus responded pragmatically, his voice clipped. "We'll acquire new art when we rebuild elsewhere." Unlike many Pompeians who, tragically, delayed their evacuation too long, the Vetii brothers acted decisively, their business instincts serving them well. They quickly gathered their household slaves, about a dozen men and women who maintained their luxurious lifestyle, and prepared to leave the city. "You have served us well," Numerius addressed the assembled slaves, his tone formal even in the chaos. "Follow us now, and if we survive this calamity, I vow you will be rewarded for your loyalty." It was a poignant moment, revealing much about the entrenched realities of Roman society. Even in this life-or-death situation, the social hierarchy remained stubbornly intact. The slaves, despite the imminent danger, had no choice but to follow their masters, their fates inextricably tied to these men who had once been slaves themselves. The Vetii household set out together, a small, desperate procession. The brothers carried their valuable chests, while the slaves were burdened with supplies and additional household treasures, their arms laden. They made for the Porta di Sarno, the new Sarno Gate, planning to head southeast, away from the volcano's immediate fury. But the gods, it seemed, had different, crueler plans for the wealthy household. As they made their way through the ash-filled streets, navigating the increasing chaos, the roof of a nearby building suddenly collapsed under the immense weight of accumulated pumice. Aulus was struck by falling debris, a heavy beam crashing down, severely injuring him, crippling their escape. The entire household was forced to seek immediate shelter in a nearby Falonica, a laundry workshop with unusually thick, sturdy walls, a place of industry now turned into a fragile refuge. There, as Numerius desperately tended to his brother's grievous wounds, the first pyroclastic surge, a superheated wave of death, found them. The intense heat, an invisible, searing force, passed through the building despite its sturdy construction. Masters and slaves perished together, their bodies eventually creating the hollow impressions in the hardened ash that future archaeologists would discover and preserve with plaster casts. Their final tableau, frozen in time, reveals much about human relationships in their society. Numerius cradling his injured brother, slaves gathered around, one woman holding a child close. In death, the barriers between them seemed less significant, less important, than the shared humanity of their final, terrifying moments. Let's turn our attention now to one of the most unique and poignant features of Pompeii's destruction: the extraordinary preservation of the mundane, everyday aspects of Roman life, frozen forever in time by the disaster. In a modest thermopolium, an ancient fast food establishment nestled on the bustling corner of the Via dell'Abbondanza and the Vicolo dei Saprestani, the proprietor, Vetutius Placidus, was stubbornly reluctant to abandon his livelihood when the eruption began. As others fled past his shop in growing panic, he continued to serve hot food and drinks from the large earthenware jars embedded in his distinctive L-shaped counter, a familiar sight to many. "It will pass," he told a frantic customer who dared to suggest he close up shop and evacuate. "And when it does, people will be hungry and thirsty. That's good business." Vetutius continued his work, meticulously dishing out stew and pouring wine, even as ash began to accumulate visibly in the street outside, coating everything in a fine, gray powder. His wife, Astia, pleaded with him, her voice growing more desperate with each passing minute. But he was a stubborn man, fiercely devoted to his trade. "Just a little longer," he insisted, wiping his brow with a grimy hand. "People need hot food on a day like this." Perversely, business actually improved for a time. Refugees from neighborhoods closer to the volcano, exhausted and terrified, stopped for sustenance before continuing their arduous journey. Vetutius served them all, accepting their coins and filling their cups with watered wine and their bowls with simple, hot stews, kept warm in his counter jars. But as conditions outside worsened dramatically and fewer customers appeared, even Vetusius had to finally acknowledge the undeniable, overwhelming danger. He finally began the reluctant process of closing his shop, securing what few valuables he could in a small chest, the day's earnings, a surprisingly large sum, and some family jewelry. His wife, Astia, had already packed a bundle of clothes and essential household necessities, ready for their escape. They were about to leave, their hearts pounding, when several people suddenly rushed into the Thermopolium, seeking desperate shelter from the increasingly heavy fall of pumice stones outside. Among them was a pregnant woman, clearly exhausted, her face pale, struggling desperately to continue. "Please," she gasped, clutching her swollen belly. "I need to rest, just for a moment." Vetusius's wife, Astia, her compassionate nature overriding any fear, immediately helped the woman to a bench. "Of course," she said gently, glaring pointedly at her husband to silence any potential objection. "Sit here. Catch your breath." That single, selfless moment of compassion, a brief, humane pause in the face of calamity, sealed their fate. The delay proved tragically costly. As they waited for the pregnant woman to recover enough strength to continue, the fall of pumice and ash outside intensified to an unbearable, deadly barrage. By the time they were ready to leave, venturing outside had become a death sentence. They were forced to remain in the Thermopolium, trapped, desperately hoping the sturdy building would somehow protect them. When archaeologists would excavate this site centuries later, they would find their bodies in the back room of the shop, frozen in their final moments. Alongside them, the shop's strongbox remained, containing 683 coins, that day's earnings, tragically never spent. The pregnant woman would be among them, her unborn child, forever unborn, a poignant testament to a life never lived. Their story, the reluctant shopkeeper, his compassionate wife, the exhausted mother-to-be, represents but one of the thousands of individual tragedies that collectively comprise the larger, overwhelming disaster. Each person caught in the eruption had plans, hopes, and a future they vividly imagined. All were cut short, brutally and definitively, by the mountain's furious, indiscriminate wrath. As night descended on that first harrowing day of the eruption, an unnerving quiet settled over the devastated landscape, broken only by the mountain's distant roars and the frantic cries of those still desperately seeking escape. Most who had managed to flee the initial onslaught were long gone, a chaotic exodus that saw thousands streaming south along the coastline, their hearts pounding with a primal fear. Those who remained in Pompeii were, for the most part, those whose caution had turned to fatal delay, or who, in a desperate gamble for survival, had sought shelter within the city's sturdy buildings rather than risking the open road. But Vesuvius was far from finished. Throughout the evening, waves of superheated pyroclastic surges, silent and swift as specters, swept through the city, incinerating everything in their path. These deadly currents, a mixture of hot gases and volcanic debris, claimed the lives of countless more, leaving behind only the most tragic of stillness. By the dawn of October 25th, the once vibrant Roman city had been transformed into a macabre landscape. Many parts of Pompeii lay entombed under several feet of ash and pumice. Buildings, weakened by earthquakes and burdened by the incessant fall, had collapsed, their grandeur reduced to rubble. Streets, once teeming with life, were now impassable, buried under a thick, gray blanket. The majority of the population had either made a miraculous escape or perished in the night's fury. Yet, the mountain's wrath was not yet sated. Throughout this second day, additional, immense surges roared down from Vesuvius, some reaching as far as Misenum, where Pliny the Younger continued his vigilant, terrified vigil, observing the unfolding catastrophe from a relatively safe distance. These relentless surges added more layers to the burial, gradually entombing not only Pompeii, but also Herculaneum and other settlements nestled around the volcano's base. One of the most remarkable and tragic aspects of the disaster lay in how profoundly different areas were affected. Pompeii, situated to the southeast of the volcano, bore the brunt of the heavy pumice and ash fall, a suffocating blanket that descended from the sky. Herculaneum, positioned to the west, experienced a different, equally devastating fate. It was hit more directly by the scorching, fast-moving pyroclastic flows, which buried it in a harder, more cement-like material, reaching incredible depths of up to 75 feet in places. This stark difference in burial material dictated the very nature of their preservation. In Pompeii, the relatively cooler, slower-setting ash created hollow molds around the bodies of the victims as their organic matter decomposed over centuries. These poignant voids would later be filled by archaeologists with plaster, recreating the victims' final, agonizing poses. In Herculaneum, the intense, instantaneous heat of the pyroclastic flows caused the organic tissues to essentially carbonize, preserving astonishing details like facial expressions, clothing textures, and even wooden objects, locking them in a state of petrified time. The main eruptive phase, a period of unrelenting terror and destruction, continued for approximately 18 to 20 hours in total, though smaller emissions, earth tremors, and the lingering fear of further catastrophe persisted for days afterward. When Vesuvius finally fell silent, a profound and eerie stillness descended upon the ravaged land. Pompeii had utterly vanished from the visible landscape, buried under an average of 20 feet of volcanic material. The entire region was rendered unrecognizable. Where a thriving, bustling city once stood, there was now only a vast, gray, lifeless plain, an eloquent testament to nature's overwhelming power. The very geography had been rewritten. The coastline was extended as volcanic debris filled in parts of the bay. Ancient rivers were diverted from their courses, valleys were filled, and new hills were created where none had existed before. Those who had miraculously survived the disaster, perhaps as many as half of Pompeii's population who had evacuated early enough, returned to a foreign land. They could no longer even identify the precise location of their beloved city. The familiar landmarks were gone, the topography irrevocably altered. Many refugees, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs and whatever small valuables they had managed to snatch, made their way to Naples or other Roman cities, their lives uprooted forever. Emperor Titus, who had only been ruling for a mere 2 months when the disaster struck, swiftly responded to the immense tragedy. He immediately ordered extensive relief efforts for the devastated region, appointing a committee of senators to organize aid, and even contributing substantial funds from his personal treasury to assist the multitude of refugees. He would later visit the area himself, a solemn journey to personally assess the unimaginable scale of the damage. Yet, Pompeii would not be rebuilt. Unlike other Roman cities that had suffered destruction by disaster and were subsequently restored to their former glory, Pompeii and Herculaneum were abandoned entirely. The overwhelming layer of volcanic material covering them was simply too deep, the destruction too complete, to make reconstruction a practical or even conceivable endeavor. Over the ensuing centuries, even the precise memory of where these once thriving cities stood began to fade into legend. New settlements gradually arose in the region, built upon the new, altered landscape created by the eruption. Farmers tilled fields above the buried city, their plows occasionally turning up peculiar artifacts, a shard of pottery, a corroded coin, but without recognizing their profound historical significance. For nearly 1,700 years, Pompeii slept undisturbed beneath its ashen blanket, an unparalleled time capsule preserving a single, frozen day in the life of a Roman city. The people, caught in their final, desperate moments, remained locked in time. The buildings, with their vivid artwork still adorning the walls, stood silently. The streets, with their deep wheel ruts and convenient stepping stones, awaited rediscovery. The shops, with goods still arrayed on their shelves, lay in darkness. All waited patiently for the day they would be rediscovered and their extraordinary story told once more. The furious rhythm of falling ash had long since ceased, replaced by the subtle, patient shifting of earth as it settled over centuries. The formidable mountain that had claimed so many lives returned to dormancy, though it would awaken again, with terrifying regularity, many times throughout history. Slowly, the landscape began to heal. Green plants pushed through the fertile volcanic soil, and nature, with its relentless persistence, reclaimed what had briefly been a barren wasteland. And so, Pompeii rested, its streets silent, its people stilled, its vibrant daily life interrupted mid-moment. It was preserved not in life, but in death, awaiting future generations to uncover its secrets and learn from its profound tragedy. The ash-covered ruins of Pompeii lay silent for centuries, the once bustling streets now still and hidden from the world above. The memory of the city faded, its exact location forgotten as generations passed, turning from vivid remembrance to vague legend. Farmers tilled the fertile volcanic soil that had become the graveyard of an ancient civilization, utterly unaware of the extraordinary time capsule that lay perfectly preserved beneath their feet. Occasionally, someone might dig a well or plow a field and encounter a peculiar stone, a fragment of mosaic, or an intriguing artifact, but these discoveries were largely dismissed as mere curiosities, their true significance tragically overlooked. Nearly 17 centuries passed in this way. The mighty Roman Empire rose and eventually fell, giving way to new empires and cultures. Nations were born, transformed, and dissolved. The world changed in countless ways that the citizens of Pompeii could never have imagined, their entire reality a distant echo. And all the while, their city waited, perfectly preserved in its moment of tragedy, untouched by the relentless march of time. The rediscovery of Pompeii began not with a grand, organized expedition driven by academic curiosity, but through a serendipitous series of accidents and coincidences, almost as if the city itself was slowly nudging humanity to remember. In 1592, an architect named Domenico Fontana was engaged in an ambitious engineering project, digging a canal to divert the Sarno River. During his work, he inadvertently uncovered ancient walls adorned with intricate paintings and inscriptions, along with sections of buildings. While he noted these findings in his records, he simply marked their locations and continued his monumental task, tragically unaware of the colossal significance of his discovery. The true, dedicated rediscovery would wait until 1738, when workers digging the foundations for a magnificent summer palace for the King of Naples, Charles of Bourbon, struck something unusual, something far beyond ordinary stone. They unearthed ancient marble and bronze statues, exquisitely crafted, testifying to a forgotten artistry. The king, a man of refined tastes and a keen collector, was immediately intrigued by these findings and ordered more extensive excavations in the area, driven primarily by a desire to enrich his personal collection. Initially, these excavations were far from what we would recognize as proper archaeology today. They were, in essence, glorified treasure hunts, with workers instructed to find valuable objects that could decorate the king's palaces or be added to his burgeoning collection of antiquities. Little attention was paid to the vital context of these discoveries, the surrounding structures, the layers of earth, the relationships between objects, or to less spectacular findings that might have revealed far more about the daily life of the ancient inhabitants. The excavators didn't even know which city they had stumbled upon. At first, they believed they were excavating Pompeii, another town destroyed by Vesuvius. It wasn't until 1763 that a crucial inscription was unearthed, unequivocally identifying the site as Pompeii. Meanwhile, nearby Herculaneum had been discovered even earlier, in 1709, through a similar accident when a farmer digging a well to supply water found theatrical marble works deep underground, signaling another profound secret buried beneath the volcanic mantle. Let's imagine one of these early excavations through the eyes of a young worker named Paolo, a local lad hired to dig at the site in the 1740s. The oppressive Mediterranean sun beat down, and Paolo wiped a fresh bead of sweat from his brow, smearing a streak of fine, gray ash across his cheek as he carefully scraped away at the compacted volcanic material with his small trowel. He had been working at the excavation site for 3 months now, one of dozens of laborers employed by the king's men to uncover whatever treasures might lie beneath the ground at the foot of Mount Vesuvius. The work was grueling, monotonous, and often dangerous, but it paid a meager wage, enough to feed his family. "Careful with that," barks the overseer, a stern, imposing man named Alcubierre, his voice cutting through the dusty air. He supervises the dig on behalf of the king, his eyes constantly scanning for any sign of carelessness. "Anything valuable you damage comes out of your pay." Paolo nodded, his heart giving a small lurch of fear, and continued his work with even greater caution. Yesterday, they had uncovered part of what appeared to be a large public building, its grand columns still standing defiant in the ash. Today, they were clearing the interior, and Paolo had been assigned to excavate what seemed to be a private room, its walls adorned with remnants of colorful paintings. As he meticulously scraped away more ash, something glinted, a tiny flash of light in the dull gray. His heart quickened with a mixture of hope and excitement. Finding valuable objects meant a small bonus, and his family could certainly use the extra money for bread and olive oil. Carefully, with painstaking precision, he exposed more of the object, revealing an exquisitely crafted bronze lamp, fashioned in the delicate shape of a Roman sandal. "I found something, sir," he called out, his voice a little breathless, to the overseer, who hurried over, followed by several other stern-faced officials. The lamp was quickly documented in a basic notebook, its location briefly noted, and a simple, hurried sketch made before it was unceremoniously removed from the site to join other treasures destined for the king's ever-expanding collection. Paolo felt a momentary pang of regret as the beautiful object was carried away. There was something profoundly poignant about removing these artifacts from where they had rested for so long, disconnecting them from their original context, from the lives they had once illuminated. It felt, to him, like stealing a memory. "Back to work," the overseer commanded, his voice devoid of sentiment. "There's more to find." And indeed there was. The room Paolo was excavating turned out to be remarkably well-preserved, with vibrant frescoes depicting mythological scenes covering almost every inch of the walls. The officials were visibly excited by this discovery, but their primary interest lay in whether the paintings could be carefully cut from the walls and transported to the royal collection in Naples, not in understanding the room's original purpose or the lives of those who had once used it for quiet contemplation or lively conversation. This acquisitive approach, prioritizing beautiful objects over archaeological context, characterized the early excavations at Pompeii. Many invaluable artifacts were removed with little proper documentation, and entire sections of the city were excavated haphazardly, with workers tunneling indiscriminately through fragile structures, often causing irreparable damage in their haste for discovery. Despite these significant limitations and destructive methods, word of the extraordinary discoveries at Pompeii quickly spread throughout Europe, capturing the imagination of scholars, artists, and wealthy travelers alike. Pompeii swiftly became an essential stop on the burgeoning Grand Tour, an educational and cultural journey undertaken by young European aristocrats seeking to broaden their horizons. These influential visitors often took souvenirs, fragments of mosaic, small statues, pieces of fresco, further depleting the site of its irreplaceable artifacts, unwittingly contributing to the loss of history. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, attitudes toward archaeology began a slow but significant shift. Scholars and enlightened thinkers started to recognize that there was immense value not just in beautiful, isolated objects, but in understanding the context in which they were found, in painstakingly reconstructing daily life rather than simply collecting treasures for display. One of the most significant figures in this crucial evolution was Giuseppe Fiorelli, a visionary archaeologist who became director of the excavations in 1863, following Italy's unification. Fiorelli revolutionized the approach to Pompeii, introducing systematic methods that would form the very foundation of modern archaeological practice. We must excavate not to find beautiful things, but to increase historical knowledge, Fiorelli insisted to his workers, his voice firm with conviction. Every fragment, every wall, every space has a story to tell, a piece of the past waiting to be understood. Under Fiorelli's meticulous direction, Pompeii was meticulously divided into a precise grid of regions and insulae, city blocks, creating an orderly system for accurately documenting the exact location of every single finding. He insisted on careful, stratigraphic excavation that preserved structures rather than haphazardly tunneling through them. Perhaps most importantly, he ensured that ordinary objects, humble cooking utensils, simple tools, everyday pottery, were valued and preserved alongside the more spectacular findings, recognizing their equal importance in painting a complete picture of ancient Roman life. But Fiorelli's most famous and profoundly moving innovation came from a remarkable observation. While supervising excavations, workers occasionally encountered curious cavities within the compacted volcanic ash, hollow spaces where something had clearly been encased but had since decomposed, leaving its perfect impression in the hardened material. Fiorelli, with a flash of brilliant insight, realized that these cavities were the exact spaces left by the bodies of the eruption's victims. Over centuries, the soft tissues had decayed, but the hardened ash had retained the precise shape of their bodies at the moment of death. In a stroke of genius, he developed a pioneering technique for filling these cavities with liquid plaster, creating astonishingly lifelike casts that revealed the victims in breathtaking detail. Their final postures, the folds of their clothing, their desperate gestures, and even the agonizing expressions on their faces. It was a profound act of historical resurrection, bringing the human tragedy vividly to life. Let's imagine the momentous day of this groundbreaking discovery. It was a warm, hopeful spring morning in 1863, and Fiorelli, his spectacles perched on his nose, was overseeing excavations in a street near the ancient Stabian Gate, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and the distant scent of wild herbs. A worker named Marco, his face smudged with ash, called out excitedly, having discovered a particularly large and clearly defined cavity in the ash. "Director Fiorelli, there's something strange here. A large hollow space with what looks like bones inside." Fiorelli hurried over, his scholarly mind already racing with the thrilling possibilities. He examined the cavity carefully, noting the telltale human bones visible at one end. "This is it," he murmured, almost to himself, a tremor of excitement in his voice. "This is what I've been theorizing about." He turned to his eager assistant. "Bring the plaster mixture immediately. We're going to try something new, something truly revolutionary." Workers quickly, but carefully, mixed plaster of Paris with water, creating a thick, creamy liquid that could be slowly poured into the cavity. Fiorelli directed the entire operation with focused intensity, ensuring the plaster flowed into every single part of the space. Then they waited, the anticipation palpable among the gathered workers and scholars, a hushed reverence descending upon the sight. The next day, with the morning sun casting long shadows, they carefully chipped away the surrounding ash to reveal what the plaster had captured. And the result was utterly breathtaking. There, rendered in perfect, poignant detail, was the form of a person, frozen forever in their final moment. It was a man, lying on his back, his hands raised in a futile, desperate attempt to protect himself from the deadly pyroclastic surge. The plaster had captured every single detail, the folds of his simple tunic, the straps of his worn sandals, even the agonized expression etched onto his face, a silent scream across millennia. "Remarkable," whispered one of the scholars present, his voice filled with awe. "It's as if we're looking at him across the centuries, at the very moment of his death." Fiorelli nodded solemnly, his gaze fixed on the cast. "This is not just a scientific technique," he said, his voice quiet but profound. "This is our duty to the dead, to remember them, to bear witness to their final moments, to give them a voice once more." This groundbreaking technique would eventually be used to create hundreds of these haunting casts, each telling its own poignant story. A mother cradling her child, their last embrace frozen. A dog, straining desperately at its chain. A group of people huddled together in a small room, seeking comfort in their final seconds. These casts humanize the disaster in a way that artifacts alone never could, creating a powerful, immediate emotional connection between modern viewers and the ancient tragedy, transforming dusty relics into vivid human experience. As the excavations continued through the late 19th and into the 20th century, more and more of Pompeii was painstakingly uncovered, revealing a remarkably complete and vivid picture of Roman urban life. Ordinary homes, bustling shops, grand public buildings, intricate water systems, and even pervasive graffiti, all preserved as if frozen in a single, catastrophic moment. One particularly remarkable category of discovery came in the form of carbonized food items, loaves of bread still baking in ovens, bowls of fruit on kitchen counters, and even complete meals that had been laid out on tables when the eruption violently began. These findings provided unprecedented insight into the Roman diet, their culinary practices, and the rhythms of their daily sustenance. The magnificent house of the Vetii, which we visited earlier in our narrative, was excavated in the 1890s, revealing some of the most beautiful and well-preserved frescoes in all of Pompeii. The wealthy freedman brothers, Aulus Vettius Conviva and Numerius Vettius Restitutus, who had once been slaves themselves, had clearly spared no expense in decorating their opulent home with vibrant artwork depicting intricate mythological scenes and charming cupids engaged in various trades. Nearby, archaeologists would later discover plaster casts that may well have been the Vettii brothers and members of their household, poignantly confirming the story we imagined of their final, shared moments. The Thermopolium of Vetusius Placidus, that ancient Roman fast food counter, was excavated in the early 20th century, revealing the distinctive L-shaped counter with its embedded storage jars, exactly as we described it. In a back room, they found the strong box containing 683 coins, the day's earnings that Vetusius never had a chance to spend, a stark reminder of life abruptly halted. Each new discovery added another crucial piece to the vast puzzle, allowing archaeologists and historians to reconstruct not just the buildings and streets of Pompeii, but the rich, intricate lives of its inhabitants. Their work, their leisure activities, their religious practices, and the complex tapestry of their social structures. The graffiti found etched onto Pompeii's walls proved especially valuable, offering unfiltered, raw glimpses into the thoughts, opinions, and daily concerns of ordinary people. Political slogans, advertisements for gladiatorial contests, heartfelt declarations of love, crude jokes, and stinging insults, all preserved exactly as they were written nearly 2 millennia ago, a direct voice from the past. One wall, famously, bears the inscription, Celadus, the Thracian gladiator, is the delight of all the girls. This simple, universal graffiti confirms our story of the popular gladiator who, in our narrative, died helping others escape the eruption, a hero remembered by his fans. Another reads, I made bread here, Baker Proculus, a humble laborer leaving his mark for posterity, never imagining that his simple statement would be read by thousands of people thousands of years later. As excavations continued into the 20th century, archaeological methods became increasingly sophisticated and interdisciplinary. Scientists from various fields, volcanology, anthropology, paleobotany, and others, began to collaborate, each bringing their specialized expertise to bear on understanding different aspects of Pompeii and its profound destruction. In the 1980s and 1990s, archaeologists began using more advanced techniques to examine the human remains found at Pompeii. By analyzing bones, they could determine intricate details about diet, prevalent health conditions, and even occupations. Dental analysis, for instance, revealed surprisingly good oral health among many Pompeians, likely due to their low-sugar diet and the natural fluoride present in the local water supply. More recently, DNA analysis has offered entirely new insights into the population of Pompeii, revealing a genetic diversity that beautifully reflects the cosmopolitan nature of the Roman Empire. People from throughout the Mediterranean world and far beyond lived, worked, and thrived in this busy commercial center. Perhaps most significantly, modern volcanologists have been able to study the eruption of Vesuvius in unprecedented detail, meticulously reconstructing the precise sequence of events that unfolded on that fateful October day in 79 AD. Their findings largely confirm the timeline we've described in our story. The initial, towering column of ash and pumice, followed by the devastating pyroclastic surges that were responsible for the vast majority of deaths in both Pompeii and Herculaneum. Today, approximately two-thirds of ancient Pompeii has been excavated, with about one-third still lying buried beneath the volcanic material. This unexcavated portion is now intentionally left entombed by archaeologists, a deliberate act of preservation for future generations who will undoubtedly possess better techniques and more advanced technologies. It's a profound recognition that excavation, by its very nature, is a destructive process. Once a site is dug up, some context is inevitably lost, even with the most careful and meticulous methods. The already excavated portions of Pompeii, however, face their own complex preservation challenges. Exposure to the harsh elements, relentless rain, corrosive wind, intense sunlight, and extreme temperature fluctuations causes continuous deterioration of the ancient structures and artworks. Modern pollution and the constant vibrations from millions of tourist footsteps add to the immense stress on these fragile, irreplaceable remains. In 2010, one of Pompeii's most famous buildings, the Scola Armaturarum or House of the Gladiators, dramatically collapsed after heavy rainfall, a stark and urgent highlight of the ongoing risk to these priceless archaeological treasures. This tragic incident led to increased international attention and a surge of funding for critical conservation efforts at the site. Today, a dedicated and multidisciplinary team of archaeologists, conservators, architects, and other specialists works continuously to preserve what has been excavated, while simultaneously continuing to study and learn from the site's unending revelations. New technologies, from ground-penetrating radar that maps buried structures without disturbing them, to highly detailed 3D scanning that creates virtual models of the city, allow them to document Pompeii in unprecedented detail and to monitor subtle changes that might indicate structural problems. Let's imagine a modern archaeological team at work in Pompeii. Dr. Elena Rossi carefully brushes away fine dust from a newly uncovered mosaic floor in what appears to be a wealthy home in Pompeii's Region 9, her movements precise and deliberate. Unlike the early excavators who might have simply noted the mosaic's beauty before hastily moving on, Dr. Rossi and her team document everything meticulously, using every tool at their disposal. A colleague photographs the mosaic from multiple angles with a high-resolution camera, while another uses a specialized laser scanner to create an incredibly detailed 3D model of the floor, capturing every tessera. Nearby, a botanical archaeologist carefully collects samples from the ancient garden soil for laboratory analysis, hoping to identify what plants bloomed here 2 millennia ago, recreating the scents and colors of a lost garden. Look at this craftsmanship, Dr. Rossi remarks, pointing to the intricate pattern of the mosaic, her voice filled with admiration. The owner of this house spared no expense. See how the tesserae get smaller and more detailed in the central emblem? That's the mark of a master craftsman, a true artist. Her colleague nods in agreement. The pigments used here are interesting, too. Some of these blues might have come from as far away as Afghanistan. It shows the incredible reach and sophistication of Roman trade networks. This level of detailed analysis, considering not just what was found, but what it tells us about ancient technology, global trade, social status, and daily life, represents the profound evolution of archaeological thought since those early, haphazard treasure hunts of the 18th century. As they work, groups of tourists observe from behind respectful barriers, cameras clicking, as knowledgeable guides explain the significance of what they're seeing. Pompeii receives over 2.5 million visitors annually, making it one of Italy's most popular tourist destinations and creating a delicate, ongoing balance between accessibility for the public and the crucial preservation of the ancient remains. One of the most poignant and powerful aspects of Pompeii for modern visitors is the deep, almost visceral connection they feel to the ancient Romans who once walked these very streets. The deep wheel ruts worn into the stone paving by countless chariots and carts, the intimate graffiti scratched onto sun-drenched walls, the counters of the Thermopylae, worn smooth by thousands of leaning elbows. These tangible, human traces of everyday life create an undeniable bridge across the centuries, dissolving the vast expanse of time. When visitors encounter the plaster casts of victims, a child curled up in fear, a loyal dog contorted in its final struggles, a couple embracing as death relentlessly approached, they often find themselves deeply, profoundly moved. These are not merely archaeological specimens. They are fellow human beings, caught in a moment of terror and tragedy that transcends time and culture, inviting a universal empathy. Archaeological work at Pompeii continues to this very day, with new discoveries regularly adding to our understanding. In 2020, archaeologists uncovered a remarkably well-preserved thermopolium, complete with brightly decorated food containers, the carbonized remains of duck, goat, pork, and fish still within them, and vibrant frescoes advertising the establishment's offerings. It was as if the shop had been closed only yesterday. Its owners merely stepped out for a moment, rather than nearly 2,000 years ago. This ongoing, meticulous work ensures that Pompeii remains not a static monument to a distant past, but a vibrant, living laboratory where our understanding continually evolves. Each generation of archaeologists brings new questions, new techniques, and fresh perspectives to this extraordinary site, breathing new life into ancient stories. As night falls once more over the excavated ruins of Pompeii, the modern city lights twinkle in the distance, a stark contrast to the ancient darkness. Mount Vesuvius stands majestically silhouetted against the deepening twilight sky, a constant, silent reminder of the natural force that both ruthlessly destroyed and miraculously preserved this ancient city. The volcano has erupted many times since 79 AD, most recently in 1944, and volcanologists consider it one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world due to the large, unsuspecting population living in its immediate vicinity. In the quiet evening hours, when the last of the tourists have departed and only security guards patrol the silent, empty streets, it's easy to imagine the ghosts of Pompeii's inhabitants going about their business. One can almost see Marcus Lucretius negotiating with customers in the forum, Celadus the gladiator training diligently in the barracks, Vetutius Placidus serving steaming food from his thermopolium counter, the Vetii brothers hosting lavish guests in their exquisitely decorated triclinium. Their city, frozen in time by disaster, now serves as an unparalleled window into the ancient world, a powerful reminder of both the profound fragility of human life and the enduring, resilient nature of human civilization. The story of Pompeii, its vibrant life, its sudden, cataclysmic destruction, its long, silent sleep beneath the ash, and its gradual, miraculous awakening through archaeology, continues to captivate and enthrall us, connecting us to our shared human past across the vast expanse of time. As the gentle Mediterranean breeze whispers through the ancient ruins, carrying the faint scent of pine and distant seas, we can almost hear the echoes of Roman voices from that fateful day, going about their ordinary lives, utterly unaware that their final, unsuspecting moments would become an enduring testament to the human experience, perfectly preserved for thousands of years beneath the ominous shadow of the mountain. The soft moonlight illuminates the ancient stones, casting gentle, ethereal shadows across the forum where citizens once gathered, the temples where they prayed to their gods, and the homes where they lived, loved, and eventually met their abrupt end. In this peaceful night scene, so profoundly different from the chaos and terror of the eruption, Pompeii continues its silent but eloquent testimony to the lives that were lived and tragically lost here. Ordinary people whose extraordinary preservation allows us to reach across time and recognize our common humanity. The morning sun casts long, stretching shadows across Pompeii's ancient streets, illuminating the weathered stones that have witnessed the passage of countless centuries. Modern researchers arrive at the archaeological site, equipped with technology that would seem like pure magic to the Romans who once walked these very paths. Today's scientists are continuing a journey of discovery that began with those first, clumsy excavations, but with tools and methods that grow more sophisticated and precise with each passing year. Dr. Sofia Martinez adjusts her augmented reality headset as she walks through the house of the tragic poet, a remarkably well-preserved Pompeian home famous for its striking cave canon, "Beware of the Dog," mosaic at the entrance. The advanced headset seamlessly overlays digital reconstructions onto the existing ruins, allowing her to visualize the house as it might have appeared on that fateful day in 79 AD. The vibrant wall paintings are restored to their original, dazzling colors. Furniture is meticulously placed in rooms now empty, and even animated figures move through the spaces, based on detailed archaeological evidence of how Romans lived and used their homes, bringing the silent past vividly, tangibly to life around her. "It's extraordinary," she tells her research assistant, a young woman meticulously documenting their observations on a holographic tablet. The enthusiasm in Dr. Martinez's voice is palpable, echoing through the spectral Roman rooms around them. "With this technology," she explains, "we can finally test theories about daily life that were impossible to explore before. Think of all the hypotheses about social dynamics, domestic routines, even the psychological impact of living in these spaces that were once mere conjecture." She gestures toward a spectral window, now vibrant with simulated morning light. "Look at how the light would have entered this atrium at different times of day. Its play across the frescoes and mosaics, the way it would have illuminated certain activities while leaving others in shadow. It completely changes our understanding of how these spaces functioned, how they felt, how they shaped the lives of their inhabitants. It's not just about visibility. It's about mood, status, and the very rhythm of the day. It's almost like time travel," the assistant remarks, her gaze sweeping across the digitally resurrected scene. "Almost," Dr. Martinez agrees, a thoughtful smile playing on her lips. "But it's more precise than any memory." Nearby, another team is using ground-penetrating radar, GPR, to map structures still profoundly buried beneath layers of volcanic material. Unlike earlier generations of archaeologists who had no choice but to excavate, a process often destructive, even if carefully done, these scientists can create incredibly detailed, three-dimensional images of buried buildings without disturbing a single stone. This non-invasive approach is a testament to a new archaeological ethic, one that prioritizes preservation, leaving these hidden treasures undisturbed for future researchers who will undoubtedly wield even better techniques and insights. It's a profound commitment to intergenerational scholarship. "We've identified what appears to be a large public building in the unexcavated section of Region 9, explains Dr. Paolo Russo, his finger tracing a complex, tessellated pattern on his ruggedized tablet screen. The radar imagery reveals intricate layouts beneath the earth, outlining walls, rooms, and even substructures with astonishing clarity. Based on its layout and size, it might very well be another grand bath complex, a testament to Roman engineering and their appreciation for communal life. But rather than dig it up immediately, we're creating a complete digital model first, meticulously mapping every nuance before any physical intervention. Future archaeologists will thank us for our restraint," he asserts, a quiet conviction in his tone. This approach represents a profound shift in archaeological philosophy, a deliberate departure from the early days when excavators raced against time, driven by curiosity and often the pressures of patronage, to uncover as much as possible as quickly as possible. Modern researchers, by contrast, often choose to leave discoveries buried, protected from the ravages of exposure to the elements, the insidious grip of pollution, and the unintentional damage inflicted by mass tourism, until such a time as they can be properly preserved and presented with the utmost care. It is a philosophy of patience and long-term stewardship. In the meticulously equipped laboratory section of Pompeii's sprawling research center, other specialists apply equally advanced techniques to artifacts and human remains. A bioarchaeologist, Dr. Lena Hansen, examines the teeth from a plaster cast of a young woman, a delicate task performed under powerful magnification. Using sophisticated isotope analysis, she can determine where the woman grew up based on the chemical signature of the water she drank as a child, an indelible record left within her dental enamel. She wasn't born in Pompeii, the scientist notes with keen interest, adjusting her microscope. The specific isotope pattern suggests she grew up far away, perhaps in North Africa, potentially Alexandria. It's another compelling piece of evidence showing just how diverse and incredibly cosmopolitan this city was, a true crossroads of the Roman Empire, attracting people from across its vast territories, linking distant cultures through trade, migration, and ambition. Nearby, a paleobotanist, Dr. Julian Vance, studies carbonized food remains meticulously extracted from a recently excavated kitchen hearth. Each charred seed, each blackened grain, holds a story. He identifies the exact species of plants that were being prepared for a meal never eaten, a culinary snapshot frozen in time by the pyroclastic flow. The analysis reveals not just the diet of Pompeians, what they ate and how they prepared it, but also their sophisticated agricultural practices, their extensive trade connections stretching across the Mediterranean, and even subtle clues about social status based on the types of food available to different households. Did they import exotic spices from the East or subsist on local grains? The answers are here, in the ashes. In yet another specialized lab, a dedicated team employs revolutionary advanced imaging techniques, such as X-ray microtomography and optical coherence tomography, to virtually unroll and read carbonized scrolls recovered from the magnificent villa of the Pompeii in neighboring Herculaneum. These texts, incredibly fragile and brittle from the intense heat, were once thought to be lost forever, too delicate to unroll physically without reducing them to dust. The villa, a luxurious seaside residence, contained what was essentially a private library of unparalleled significance, housing hundreds of philosophical texts that now offer unprecedented insight into the intellectual life, academic debates, and literary tastes of the Roman world, a treasure trove for classicists. We're revealing words that no human eye has seen in nearly 2,000 years, whispers a researcher, Sarah Chun, her voice hushed with awe as Latin script, ghostly yet distinct, begins to appear on her high-resolution screen. This particular scroll appears to contain previously unknown works of Epicurean philosophy, perhaps lost treatises by Philodemus or even Epicurus himself. It's like receiving a message in a bottle across the centuries, she marvels, a direct intellectual conduit to minds long turned to dust. The silence in the lab is profound, broken only by the hum of the machines and the quiet clicks of the keyboard, as ancient wisdom is brought back into the light. These modern scientific approaches, from the granular precision of DNA analysis to the expansive detail of 3D modeling, from the revealing insights of isotope analysis to the nuanced spectroscopic techniques for analyzing pigments and materials, are collectively revolutionizing our understanding of Pompeii and its inhabitants. Each new investigation, each minute discovery, adds another layer to our ever-deepening knowledge, bringing us closer to the people who lived and died in the ominous shadow of Vesuvius. But perhaps the most profound change in our relationship with Pompeii is not merely technological, but deeply philosophical. It represents a fundamental shift in how we view these ancient remains and, crucially, our responsibility toward them. Dr. Martinez removes her AR headset, the vibrant simulations dissolving back into the sun-drenched, tangible ruins surrounding her. She gazes thoughtfully at the weathered stones, the silent, scarred landscape. Technology helps us see what Pompeii was, she reflects aloud, her voice soft in the vast, open air. But there's something equally powerful, almost transcendent, about engaging with what it is now, too. A place utterly transformed by catastrophe into something entirely different, a landscape of echoes and absence, yet no less meaningful, perhaps even more so. This perspective represents a growing recognition among archaeologists that ruins have their own intrinsic significance and integrity, distinct from their original form. The Pompeii we can visit today is not simply a damaged, incomplete version of the thriving Roman city. It is, in fact, a unique cultural landscape, a complex palimpsest created by the intricate interaction of human construction, cataclysmic natural disaster, the relentless passage of time, and successive waves of archaeological intervention. It's a place where decay and preservation coexist, where absence speaks volumes, and where the past is eternally present. This evolving relationship with the past extends far beyond the scientific community, touching the millions of visitors who walk Pompeii's ancient streets each year. For them, the city offers something extraordinarily rare in our bustling modern world, a place where time itself seems to collapse, where the distance between us and our ancient ancestors becomes momentarily negligible, erased by the sheer immediacy of the experience. Let's follow one such visitor, Emma, a bright college student from Chicago, as she experiences Pompeii for the very first time. Emma stands in the Forum, the vast, sun-drenched open plaza that once served as Pompeii's bustling civic, commercial, and religious heart. Her audio guide, a calm, authoritative voice in her ear, describes the grand public buildings that once surrounded this immense space. The stately basilica, where legal matters were settled and justice administered, the elegant temples, dedicated to Jupiter, Apollo, and the city's other patron deities, where citizens worshipped and offered sacrifices, the vibrant Macellum, or market, where merchants traded goods and gossip. But Emma finds herself less interested in the grand architectural forms than in the smaller, more intimate details, the subtle, human traces that connect her directly to individual lives. She pauses to examine graffiti scratched into a weather-beaten wall, a raw, unfiltered expression of daily life. She sees election endorsements, earnest pleas for votes, alongside personal messages of love and longing, even indignant complaints about unfair treatment, all scrawled with crude Latin letters. Marcus Cyrenius Vadia for Edile, a good man, the poor man's friend, reads one political slogan, still legible after 2 millennia. Emma smiles, a wry amusement crossing her face, thinking how little political advertising, with its promises and platitudes, has truly changed in 2,000 years. Humanity, she realizes, is remarkably consistent. Moving deeper into the city, guided by the sun and her curiosity, she steps into a thermopolium, an ancient fast food establishment, instantly recognizable with its distinctive L-shaped counter and large, built-in dolia, terracotta jars used to hold hot food and drinks. She can almost smell the pungent aromas of spiced wine and warm stews. She easily imagines weary shoppers stopping for a quick, fortifying meal, diligent workers grabbing lunch during a busy day, friends meeting for drinks and lively conversation, not so different from how she and her friends might meet at a cafe between classes. The universality of human habits is striking. It's when she reaches the Garden of the Fugitives, however, that the true, devastating human tragedy of Pompeii profoundly strikes her. Here, within a reverently glass-covered area, are the plaster casts of 13 individuals who sought refuge from the eruption in a quiet garden surrounded by high walls, only to be overtaken by the deadly pyroclastic surge. They lie exactly as they fell, their final, agonizing moments frozen forever. Men, women, and even small children, their forms captured in agonizing detail. One figure has his hands raised to his face, a desperate, futile gesture, perhaps trying to protect himself from the lethal gases and ash. A small child lies heart-wrenchingly close to an adult, likely a parent, trying to provide comfort and seek protection even in the face of inevitable death. Emma stands in profound silence, unexpectedly moved to tears by these anonymous strangers who died nearly 2,000 years ago. They are no longer abstract historical figures, mere statistics in a catastrophic event, but real people who feared and suffered and hoped, just as she would in their impossible situation. In that moment, the immense chasm of centuries between them seems to vanish completely. This raw, emotional connection to the past is arguably one of Pompeii's most powerful gifts to the modern world. The city's unique, almost miraculous preservation allows us to see ancient Romans not as remote, idealized, or alien historical abstractions, but as people remarkably similar to ourselves. People who wrote graffiti on walls, who enjoyed street food, who worried about politics and money, who loved their families with fierce devotion, just as we do. The plaster casts, especially, create an almost uncomfortably intimate connection across time. Unlike typical archaeological remains, fragmented bones, worn tools, or symbolic grave goods, these casts capture people in their most vulnerable, final moments, their body language eloquent in expressing fear, pain, resignation, profound despair, or tender love. They remind us, with undeniable clarity, that beneath the superficial differences of culture, language, and the vast expanse of time, lies a shared humanity and a common, inescapable mortality. This profound recognition has powerful implications for how we understand both the past and ourselves. It challenges the comfortable, often self-serving notion that ancient peoples were fundamentally different from us, that we have somehow progressed beyond them in all meaningful ways. The people of Pompeii certainly had different technologies and social structures than we do, but their essential human experiences, their joys and sorrows, their daily routines and grand special occasions, their complex relationships and fervent aspirations, resonate with startling familiarity with our own. They dreamt, they laughed, they grieved, they lived. As Emma quietly continues her visit, she notices a small, humble shrine nestled in what was once someone's home, a lararium. Here, a family would have made daily offerings to their household gods and deified ancestors, seeking protection and prosperity. The painted figures of the Lares, the household guardians, are still faintly visible, their silent vigil protecting this sacred space for nearly 2 millennia after the family they watched over perished. She reflects on how the Pompeians understood their place in the world, their intricate relationship to the gods, to the capricious forces of nature, to time itself. They lived in a society that viewed time as cyclical, rather than linear, a constant ebb and flow. They saw natural disasters like the eruption not as geological processes, but often as expressions of divine displeasure or the whims of fate. Yet, their gut responses to danger, the primal instinct to protect loved ones, to snatch up precious valuables, to frantically seek shelter, were entirely recognizable, a testament to the enduring core of human survival. Pompeii also offers sobering, undeniable parallels to our modern relationship with natural hazards. The Pompeians built their beautiful, thriving city directly in the shadow of an active volcano, either blissfully unaware of or willfully undeterred by the immense risk it posed. They ignored increasingly obvious warning signs, the persistent, unsettling earthquakes that preceded the eruption, the initial, deceptively mild phases of the eruption itself, until for many, it was tragically too late to escape. How different is this from our own modern cities, often sprawling precariously on active fault lines, or in hurricane-prone coastal zones, or on floodplains? How often do we, like the Pompeians, convince ourselves that the danger isn't truly imminent, that we'll have ample time to react when necessary, or that technology will surely save us? The disaster at Pompeii wasn't simply a product of ancient ignorance. It reflects deep-seated patterns of human behavior and psychology, denial, complacency, a fundamental underestimation of nature's power that persists to this very day, making its lessons all the more urgent. As the sun begins its slow descent over Pompeii, casting a long, golden glow across the ancient stones and illuminating the scars of time. Emma finds herself at the very edge of the excavated city, looking out over the vast, untouched areas still buried beneath volcanic ash. The landscape stretches away, silent, it's extraordinary. She marvels to her research assistant, who meticulously documents their findings. Truly an unprecedented leap. She gestures around the meticulously recreated Roman household, the air shimmering with holographic light. With this technology, we're not just observing. We're actively testing hypotheses about daily life that were previously impossible to verify. Imagine being able to dynamically adjust the time of day to watch the sun's arc move across the sky. She points. Look at how the golden light would have filtered into this atrium at different hours, transforming its mood and utility. It doesn't just inform. It completely revolutionizes our understanding of how these ancient spaces were designed, experienced, and functioned for their inhabitants. Meanwhile, just beyond the virtual threshold, another team is at work, employing cutting-edge ground-penetrating radar to painstakingly map structures still slumbering beneath the meters of volcanic debris. Unlike the pioneering archaeologists of past generations, who often had no recourse but to dig, irrevocably disturbing the very sites they sought to understand, these contemporary scientists possess the remarkable ability to generate intricate, three-dimensional images of buried buildings without dislodging a single stone. This non-invasive approach ensures these invaluable structures are preserved intact, waiting undisturbed for future researchers who may, in turn, develop even more sophisticated techniques. We've identified what appears to be a substantial public building in the unexcavated section of Region 9, explains Dr. Paolo Russo, his brow furrowed in concentration as he scrolls through the detailed radar imagery on his ruggedized tablet. Based on its distinct layout, the series of interconnected rooms, the telltale water channels, it strongly suggests another bath complex. But rather than rush to unearth it immediately, a decision that would expose it to the elements and potential degradation, we're meticulously creating a comprehensive digital model first. This gives us all the information without the risk. Future archaeologists, armed with technologies we can only dream of today, will undoubtedly thank us for our restraint. This careful, considered approach represents a profound and ethical shift in archaeological philosophy, where early excavators, driven by curiosity and the sheer scale of the task, often raced against time to uncover as much as possible as quickly as possible. Modern researchers increasingly opt to leave discoveries buried, shielded from the corrosive effects of exposure to the elements, airborne pollution, and the wear and tear of tourism, until the most optimal methods for their preservation and study can be properly implemented. In a separate, climate-controlled section of Pompeii's sprawling research center, other specialists apply equally advanced techniques to an array of artifacts and precious human remains. Here, a bioarchaeologist meticulously examines the fossilized teeth from a plaster cast of a young woman. Using sophisticated isotope analysis, a method that deciphers the chemical signatures locked within the enamel, she seeks to determine the woman's geographical origins, tracing where she grew up based on the unique chemical composition of the water she consumed as a child. A moment later, a flicker of excitement crosses her face. She wasn't born in Pompeii, the scientist notes with keen interest, adjusting her magnifying visor. The specific isotope pattern strongly suggests she grew up in North Africa, perhaps even Alexandria. It's yet another compelling piece of evidence, adding a new brushstroke to the already vibrant canvas of how truly diverse and cosmopolitan this city was. She pauses, reflecting, a true crossroads of the Roman Empire, indeed. Nearby, a paleobotanist, surrounded by microscopes and petri dishes, studies carbonized food, remains carefully extracted from a recently excavated kitchen. With painstaking precision, she identifies the exact species of plants that were being prepared for a meal that, tragically, was never eaten. The analysis doesn't merely tell us what Pompeians ate. It provides invaluable insights into their agricultural practices, the intricate web of their trade connections, and even subtle clues about social status, discernible from the types of food available to different households, evidence of exotic imports or humble local produce. In yet another specialized laboratory, a dedicated team utilizes incredibly advanced imaging techniques to virtually unroll and read carbonized scrolls recovered from the magnificent villa of the Pompeii in neighboring Herculaneum. These are texts that, for centuries, were thought to be forever lost, too fragile to physically unroll without crumbling into dust. The villa itself was home to what was essentially a private library, a treasure trove containing hundreds of philosophical texts that now offer unprecedented insight into the rich intellectual life of the Roman world. We're revealing words that no human eye has seen in nearly 2,000 years, whispers a researcher, her voice barely audible, as lines of ancient Greek text begin to materialize on her screen, rendered visible by the advanced multispectral imaging. This particular scroll appears to contain previously unknown works of Epicurean philosophy. It's like receiving a profound message in a bottle, cast adrift across the vast expanse of the centuries, finally washing ashore today. These revolutionary modern scientific approaches, spanning everything from forensic DNA analysis to high-definition 3D modeling, to sophisticated spectroscopic techniques for analyzing pigments and materials, are fundamentally revolutionizing our understanding of Pompeii and its long-lost inhabitants. Each new investigation, each carefully analyzed fragment, adds another intricate layer to our ever-expanding knowledge, bringing us closer, tangibly and intimately, to the people who lived and died in the ominous shadow of Vesuvius. Yet, perhaps the most profound transformation in our relationship with Pompeii is not merely technological, but deeply philosophical. It represents a fundamental shift in how we view these magnificent, ancient remains and, crucially, our inherent responsibility toward them. Dr. Martinez, having carefully removed her AR headset, gazes with a new perspective at the actual, weathered ruins that surround her. Technology helps us vividly see what Pompeii was, she reflects aloud, her voice thoughtful. But there's something equally powerful, almost sacred, about engaging with what it is now. A place utterly transformed by an unimaginable catastrophe into something entirely different, scarred yet no less meaningful, radiating its own unique integrity. This evolving perspective embodies a growing recognition among archaeologists that ruins possess their own distinct significance and inherent integrity. The Pompeii we can visit today is not simply a damaged, incomplete version of a bustling Roman city. It is a unique, living cultural landscape, meticulously shaped by the dynamic interplay of human construction, catastrophic natural disaster, the relentless passage of time, and the careful intervention of archaeological inquiry. This continuously evolving relationship with the past extends far beyond the confines of the scientific community, touching the hearts and minds of the millions of visitors who walk Pompeii's ancient streets each year. For them, the city offers something increasingly rare in our fast-paced, modern world. A place where time seems to momentarily collapse, where the vast distance between ourselves and our ancestors becomes, for a precious instant, negligible. Let's follow one such visitor, Emma, a college student from Chicago, as she experiences Pompeii for the very first time. Emma stands in the Forum, the vast, open plaza that once served as the vibrant civic heart of Pompeii. Her meticulously narrated audio guide describes in vivid detail the grand buildings that once encircled this bustling space. The imposing basilica, where weighty legal matters were settled and justice was meted out. The sacred temples where citizens offered fervent worship to their gods. The lively market where they traded goods, gossiped, and haggled. But Emma finds herself less captivated by the grand architecture and more drawn to the smaller, more intimate details, the subtle, human touches that forge an immediate connection to individual lives. She pauses, her eyes tracing the ancient graffiti scratched into a weathered wall, election endorsements urging support for local candidates, poignant personal messages, even frustrated complaints about unfair treatment, echoing grievances that transcend millennia. Marcus Cyrenius Vadia for Edile, a good man, the poor man's friend, reads one political slogan, still legible after 2 millennia. Emma smiles faintly, a flicker of amusement crossing her face, as she reflects on how remarkably little political advertising has truly changed in 2,000 years. Moving through the city, she steps into a thermopolium, an ancient fast food establishment, its vibrant counters, still adorned with colorful frescoes, remarkably intact. She can effortlessly imagine weary shoppers pausing for a quick, hearty meal, laborers grabbing lunch during a busy workday, or friends meeting for a casual drink and animated conversation. Scenes not so different from how she and her friends might gather at a cafe between classes. The universality of human needs and social rituals strikes her profoundly. It is when she reaches the Garden of the Fugitives that the profound human tragedy of Pompeii truly, viscerally strikes her. Here, protected within a solemn, glass-covered area, are the haunting plaster casts of 13 individuals who, in their final desperate moments, sought refuge from the terrifying eruption in this very garden, its walls now ironically offering no escape. They lie precisely as they fell, frozen in their agony, men, women, and children, caught utterly unprepared in their final moments. One figure has his hands raised protectively to his face, perhaps a futile attempt to shield himself from the suffocating ash and lethal gases. A small child lies poignantly close to an adult, likely a parent, a heartbreaking testament to an instinct to provide comfort, even in the face of inevitable death. Emma stands in hushed silence, unexpectedly, deeply moved by these strangers who perished nearly 2,000 years ago. They are no longer abstract historical figures gleaned from textbooks, but real people, individuals who feared, suffered, and hoped, just as she herself would in their unimaginable situation. In that profound moment, the vast chasm of centuries between them seems to utterly vanish. This raw, emotional connection to the past is, arguably, one of Pompeii's most powerful and enduring gifts to the modern world. The city's utterly unique preservation allows us to perceive ancient Romans not as remote, static historical abstractions, but as people remarkably, startlingly similar to ourselves. Individuals who wrote playful or urgent graffiti, who savored street food, who worried about politics and personal finances, and who deeply loved their families. The plaster casts, in particular, forge an almost uncomfortably intimate connection across time. Unlike typical archaeological remains, fragmented bones, or impersonal grave goods, these casts capture people in their most vulnerable, unguarded moments, their very body language eloquently expressing raw fear, excruciating pain, resigned acceptance, or profound love. They serve as a stark, powerful reminder that beneath the superficial differences of culture, language, and the relentless march of time, lies a shared humanity and the inescapable reality of common mortality. This profound recognition has far-reaching implications for how we understand both the distant past and, indeed, ourselves. It directly challenges the comforting, yet often misleading, notion that ancient peoples were fundamentally different from us, that we have somehow progressed beyond them in all meaningful ways. The people of Pompeii certainly possessed different technologies and lived within different social structures, but their essential human experiences, their joys and sorrows, their mundane daily routines and their cherished special occasions, their complex relationships and their deeply held aspirations, resonate with an almost shocking familiarity with our own. As Emma continues her poignant visit, she notices a small, intricately painted shrine in what was once someone's humble home, a lararium, where a family would have made daily offerings to their household gods and beloved ancestors. The faded, yet still discernible, painted figures seem to stand guard, silently protecting this sacred space for nearly 2 millennia after the family they watched over tragically perished. She reflects on how the Pompeians understood their place in the world, their intricate relationship to their gods, to the overwhelming forces of nature, into the very fabric of time itself. They inhabited a society that largely viewed time as cyclical rather than linear, that perceived natural disasters as unambiguous expressions of divine displeasure rather than the cold, impersonal forces of geological processes. Yet, their gut responses to immediate danger, the primal instinct to protect loved ones, to desperately clutch at cherished valuables, to seek any form of shelter, were entirely recognizable, reflecting a universal human response to crisis. Pompeii also offers sobering, undeniably pertinent parallels to our modern relationship with natural hazards. The Pompeians, with their advanced engineering and vibrant culture, constructed their beautiful city in the very shadow of an active volcano, either blissfully unaware of or stubbornly undeterred by the immense, inherent risk it posed. "It's extraordinary," Dr. Martinez remarks to her research assistant, who meticulously records their observations, his tablet a blur of notes and schematics. "With this immersive technology, we can rigorously test theories about daily life, about the very physics of their existence, in ways that were utterly impossible to explore just a decade ago. Imagine the hypotheses we can now validate or refute." She gestures toward a simulated window. "Look at how the light would have streamed into this atrium at different times of day, how it would have painted the walls, illuminated the frescoes, defined the very rhythm of activity within this space. It completely, profoundly changes our understanding of how these domestic spaces functioned, how they felt, how they were lived in." Nearby, another specialized team works with quiet intensity. They are deploying advanced ground-penetrating radar units, their sensors sweeping across the earth like silent diviners, to map intricate structures still perfectly preserved, yet entirely buried beneath layers of volcanic material. This stands in stark contrast to earlier generations of archaeologists who, armed only with picks and shovels, had to relentlessly excavate to discover what lay beneath. These contemporary scientists, however, can create incredibly detailed, three-dimensional images of entire buried buildings without disturbing a single stone, without unsettling a grain of ash. This revolutionary approach preserves them meticulously, a pristine, untouched legacy for future researchers who will undoubtedly arrive with even better, unforeseen techniques. "We've identified what appears to be a large public building in the unexcavated section of Region 9, explains Dr. Paolo Russo, his brow furrowed in concentration as he studies the intricate radar imagery shimmering across his tablet screen. He traces a line with his finger. Based on its layout and internal divisions, it might very well be another public bath complex, perhaps one of the largest yet discovered. But rather than rush to dig it up immediately, we're creating a complete digital model first, a virtual twin. Future archaeologists will thank us for our restraint. This cautious, preservation-first approach represents a profound, almost philosophical, shift in archaeological methodology. Where early excavators often raced against time and the elements, driven by an urgent desire to uncover as much as possible as quickly as possible, modern researchers frequently choose to leave significant discoveries buried. This protective slumber safeguards them from exposure to the corrosive elements of the atmosphere, from the pervasive effects of pollution, and even from the unintended damage of tourism, until the most advanced and least intrusive preservation methods can be properly applied. In the meticulously organized laboratory section of Pompeii's sprawling research center, other specialists apply equally advanced scientific techniques to a vast array of artifacts and human remains. A bioarchaeologist, for instance, meticulously examines the surprisingly well-preserved teeth from a plaster cast of a young woman, employing sophisticated isotope analysis. This cutting-edge technique allows her to determine where the individual grew up, based on the unique chemical signature of the water she drank as a child, signatures absorbed and stored within the very enamel of her teeth. She wasn't born in Pompeii, the scientist notes with a hint of excitement, the data solidifying before her eyes. The isotope patterns strongly suggest she grew up in North Africa, perhaps even in Alexandria. It's another fascinating piece of evidence, adding a new brushstroke to the already vibrant portrait of how diverse and truly cosmopolitan this bustling Roman city truly was, a genuine crossroads of the vast Roman Empire. Nearby, a paleobotanist, armed with microscopes and spectral analyzers, studies carbonized food remains carefully extracted from a recently excavated kitchen. Her work involves identifying the exact species of plants that were being prepared for a meal tragically destined to be never eaten. The precise analysis reveals far more than just what Pompeians consumed. It sheds light on their sophisticated agricultural practices, their extensive trade connections stretching across the Mediterranean, and even subtle clues about social status based on the types and provenance of food available to different households. Did they import exotic spices? Were they cultivating specialized crops? Every charred seed tells a story. In yet another specialized lab, a dedicated team employs revolutionary advanced imaging techniques, using multispectral scanning and AI-driven algorithms to virtually read the carbonized scrolls recovered from the magnificent villa of the Pompeii in neighboring Herculaneum. These are texts that were thought to be forever lost, calcified and fused by the volcanic heat, too fragile to physically unroll without instantly destroying them. The villa contained what was essentially a private library of unparalleled scope, holding hundreds of philosophical texts, a trove that now offers unprecedented, direct insight into the intellectual life and philosophical currents of the Roman world, a window into minds nearly 2,000 years past. We're revealing words that no human eye has seen in nearly 2 millennia. A researcher whispers, her voice hushed with awe, as pristine Greek text begins to appear, letter by letter, on her high-resolution screen. This particular scroll appears to contain previously unknown works of Epicurean philosophy, a truly lost voice speaking again. She pauses, absorbing the magnitude of the moment. It's like receiving a message in a bottle cast into the ocean across the centuries, finally washing ashore today. Indeed, these modern scientific approaches, ranging from the intricate precision of DNA analysis to the comprehensive detail of 3D modeling, to the revelatory power of spectroscopic techniques for analyzing pigments and materials, are not merely advancing our understanding. They are utterly revolutionizing our grasp of Pompeii and its long-lost inhabitants. Each new investigation, each carefully extracted piece of data, adds another intricate layer to our ever-expanding knowledge, bringing us intimately closer to the complex, vibrant people who lived and ultimately died in the looming shadow of Vesuvius. But perhaps the most profound change in our relationship with Pompeii is not technological marvel, but rather a deeper, more reflective philosophical evolution. It's a fundamental shift in how we view these ancient remains and, more importantly, our solemn responsibility toward them. Dr. Martinez slowly removes her AR headset, the vibrant digital overlay dissolving, and gazes with fresh eyes at the actual, tangible ruins surrounding her, the rough stones, the eroded frescoes. Technology helps us see what Pompeii was, she reflects, her voice thoughtful. But there's something equally powerful, profoundly moving, about engaging with what it is now, too. A place utterly transformed by catastrophe into something entirely different, a landscape of echoes and absence, but no less meaningful, no less sacred. This evolving perspective represents a growing recognition among archaeologists and heritage professionals that ruins possess their own inherent significance and integrity, distinct from their original function. The Pompeii we can visit today is not simply a damaged, incomplete version of the once thriving Roman city. It is, in fact, a unique and irreplaceable cultural landscape, a complex creation forged by the intricate interaction of human construction, devastating natural disaster, the relentless erosion of time, and the ongoing intervention of archaeological discovery and preservation. This evolving, dynamic relationship with the past extends far beyond the scientific community, reaching out to the millions of diverse visitors who walk Pompeii's ancient streets each year. For them, the city offers something increasingly rare and precious in our fast-paced modern world: a sacred space where time itself seems to collapse, where the vast distance between our contemporary lives and those of our ancestors becomes momentarily, startlingly negligible. Let's follow one such visitor, Emma, a college student from Chicago, as she experiences Pompeii for the very first time. Emma stands in the heart of the Forum, the immense, sun-drenched open plaza that once served as Pompeii's bustling civic, religious, and economic center. Her audio guide, a calm, scholarly voice in her ear, paints vivid pictures of the grand buildings that once proudly surrounded this monumental space. The imposing basilica, where weighty legal matters were debated and settled, the elegant temples where citizens offered their prayers and worshipped their deities, the lively market, a hub of commerce where goods from across the empire were traded. But Emma, to her own surprise, finds herself less captivated by the majestic architecture and grand civic planning than by the smaller, more intimate details, the subtle human touches that forge an immediate, palpable connection to individual lives. She pauses, drawn almost instinctively to examine the vibrant, defiant graffiti scratched into a weather-beaten wall, bold election endorsements, tender personal messages, even passionate complaints about unfair treatment, etched in stone for eternity. Marcus Cyrenius Vadia for Edile, a good man, the poor man's friend, reads one political slogan, still surprisingly legible. Emma smiles to herself, a wry amusement flickering across her face, thinking how astonishingly little the art of political advertising has truly changed in 2 millennia. Continuing her journey through the labyrinthine streets, she steps into a thermopolium, an ancient Roman fast food establishment, its counter and brightly painted dolia, storage jars, still remarkably intact. She can effortlessly imagine weary shoppers pausing for a quick, hot meal, bustling workers grabbing lunch during a busy workday, friends meeting for drinks, and lively conversation. It feels, in essence, not so different from how she and her own friends might meet at a cafe between classes back in Chicago. It's when she reaches the quiet, haunting garden of the fugitives that the profound human tragedy of Pompeii truly strikes her, sharp and unexpected. Here, sheltered beneath a transparent glass canopy, are the heart-wrenching plaster casts of 13 individuals who sought desperate refuge from the terrifying eruption within this very garden, surrounded by its now ruined walls. They lie frozen precisely as they fell, men, women, and even small children, caught forever in their agonizing final moments. One figure has his hands raised defensively to his face, perhaps a futile attempt to shield himself from the lethal gases and falling ash. A small child lies poignantly close to an adult, likely a parent, a gesture of comfort offered even in the face of inevitable death. Emma stands in silence, tears pricking her eyes, unexpectedly and deeply moved by these long-dead strangers from nearly 2,000 years ago. They are no longer abstract historical figures, no mere statistics in a textbook, but real people who feared and suffered and hoped, just as she would in their unimaginable situation. In that powerful, shared moment, the centuries between them seemed to utterly vanish. This raw, emotional connection to the past is arguably one of Pompeii's most powerful and enduring gifts to the modern world. The city's unique, almost miraculous preservation allows us to perceive ancient Romans not as remote, alien historical abstractions, but as people remarkably, strikingly similar to ourselves. People who scribbled graffiti, who savored street food, who worried about politics and personal finances, who fiercely loved their families. The plaster casts, in particular, create an almost uncomfortably intimate connection across the vast expanse of time. Unlike typical archaeological remains, fragmented bones, or impersonal grave goods, these casts capture individuals in their most vulnerable, agonizing moments, their very body language expressing an entire spectrum of human emotion: fear, pain, resignation, or even a final, protective love. They serve as an undeniable, visceral reminder that beneath the superficial differences of culture, language, and the march of time lies a profound, shared humanity and a common, inescapable mortality. This powerful recognition has profound implications for how we understand both the distant past and, critically, ourselves in the present. It challenges the comfortable, often self-serving notion that ancient peoples were fundamentally different from us, that we have somehow progressed beyond them in all meaningful ways. The people of Pompeii certainly possessed different technologies and lived within different social structures, but their essential human experiences, their joys and sorrows, their daily routines and festive occasions, their complex relationships and heartfelt aspirations, resonate with startling familiarity with our own. As Emma continues her reflective visit, she notices a small, humble shrine nestled within what was once someone's private home, a lararium, where a family would have made daily offerings to their household gods and venerated their ancestors. The painted figures, though faded, are still visible, a quiet testament to devotion, protecting this sacred space for nearly 2 millennia after the very family they watched over perished. She reflects on how the Pompeians understood their place in the world, their intricate relationship to the pantheon of gods, to the unpredictable forces of nature, to time itself. They lived in a society that largely viewed time as cyclical rather than linear, that perceived cataclysmic natural disasters as expressions of divine displeasure or cosmic balance, rather than purely geological processes. Yet, their immediate responses to danger, the primal instinct to protect loved ones, to snatch up precious valuables, to desperately seek shelter, were entirely recognizable, entirely human. Pompeii also offers sobering parallels to our own modern relationship with natural hazards. The Pompeians, with all their ingenuity and artistry, built their beautiful, thriving city directly in the shadow of an active volcano, either unaware of or perhaps simply undeterred by the immense risk it posed. They famously ignored obvious warning signs, the persistent earthquakes that preceded the catastrophic eruption, the initial, deceptively mild phases of the eruption itself, until for many, it was tragically too late to escape. How fundamentally different is this, Emma muses, from our own sprawling modern cities, confidently built on active fault lines, or in the direct path of devastating hurricanes, or in floodplains. How often do we, like the Pompeians, persuade ourselves that the danger isn't truly imminent, that we'll have ample time to react when necessary, that somehow it won't happen to us? The disaster at Pompeii wasn't simply a product of ancient ignorance. It reflects deep-seated patterns of human behavior and psychology, a dangerous cocktail of denial, optimism bias, and a reluctance to abandon the familiar, patterns that persist stubbornly and perilously to this very day. As the sun begins its slow descent over Pompeii, casting a breathtaking golden glow across the ancient stones, transforming them into amber and ochre, Emma finds herself at the very edge of the excavated city, looking out over the vast, mysterious areas still patiently buried beneath an untouched blanket of volcanic ash. She wonders what secrets remain hidden there, what untold stories are yet to emerge from their long slumber. This, too, is one of Pompeii's profound gifts, the humbling recognition that our knowledge is always, intrinsically, incomplete, that there is always more to discover, more to understand. The city was buried suddenly, in a single cataclysmic day, but its unveiling has been a gradual, painstaking process, spanning centuries and continuing vibrantly into our own time. Each generation of archaeologists and scholars uncovers not just more of the physical city, but also new ways of understanding it, new critical questions to ask of the silent evidence. The sun dips lower still, painting the sky in fiery hues, and the first evening stars begin to appear, tiny pinpricks of light above Mount Vesuvius. The volcano stands as it has for millennia, a quiet, majestic sentinel now, but an eternal reminder of nature's formidable capacity for both awe-inspiring creation and devastating destruction. The incredibly fertile soil that makes this region so agriculturally productive, so verdant and abundant, is itself a direct product of ancient volcanic activity. And the very disaster that destroyed Pompeii also, paradoxically, perfectly preserved it, creating the extraordinary time capsule that continues to educate, move, and inspire us across the ages. As visitors slowly leave the archaeological park for the evening, their footsteps fading, a profound quiet settles over the ancient streets. In this deep stillness, it becomes easier to sense the faint echoes of those who walked here before. The soft shuffle of sandaled feet on worn stone, the vibrant hum of voices speaking now extinct Latin dialects, the myriad everyday sounds of a city pulsing with life, until that singular, cataclysmic moment when nature intervened, silencing it all. What fundamental lessons, then, should we take from Pompeii? Perhaps the most fundamental is a deeper, more urgent appreciation for the inherent fragility and preciousness of human life and human achievement. The Pompeians built a sophisticated, beautiful city, replete with advanced engineering, exquisite artistic masterpieces, and complex social systems, only to have it brutally erased in a matter of hours. Their story reminds us, starkly, that all human creations, however grand or enduring they may seem, exist in a delicate, precarious balance with natural forces far beyond our control. Yet, there is also a profound sense of hope woven into this story. The very existence of Pompeii as we know it today, meticulously preserved, passionately studied, widely visited, deeply appreciated, suggests that something of us, something essential, may endure beyond our individual lives or even the mighty civilizations we construct. The Pompeians could never, in their wildest dreams, have imagined that their ordinary lives, their homes, their possessions, and even their final, desperate moments would so utterly fascinate and deeply move people 2,000 years in the distant future that their bodies would be treated with reverence by cultures they couldn't possibly envision. In this way, Pompeii speaks powerfully to our innate human desire for remembrance, for some enduring form of immortality. The marks we leave behind, whether monumental architectural grandiosity or the fleeting intimacy of simple graffiti, may speak to future generations in ways we cannot possibly predict. The plaster cast of a person whose name is now utterly lost to history may, in its raw immediacy, move a visitor from a distant future far more deeply than the most elaborate, gold-laden tomb of an emperor. As night fully descends on Pompeii, cloaking the ancient city in a velvet darkness, it rests now, as it did for centuries, beneath its blanket of ash. But it no longer rests in obscurity. Its streets have been walked again, its stories have been told anew, its people remembered, their humanity reclaimed. What was lost has, in some immeasurable measure, been found. What was silenced speaks again, whispers across the ages. The cycle of day and night continues, as it has since long before Pompeii was ever built, and as it will continue long after our own civilizations have transformed into something utterly unrecognizable to us. The relentless rhythm of human life, birth and death, creation and destruction, the bittersweet process of forgetting and the enduring imperative of remembering, plays out against the immense, indifferent backdrop of geological time, where the lifespan of even the grandest cities and most powerful empires is but a fleeting moment. In the profound, quiet darkness of Pompeii at night, this vast perspective brings not despair, but a strange, deep comfort. We are, undeniably, part of something far larger than our individual selves, a continuous, unbroken human story that stretches backward into the mists of time and forward into the unknown future, connecting us inextricably to those who came before and to those who will surely follow. The Pompeians were, truly, not so different from us. And perhaps those who study our remains, our digital footprints and physical traces, in some distant future, will find the very same truth to be overwhelmingly evident. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again, a glorious golden sphere, over Pompeii. Archaeologists will continue their careful, meticulous work of preservation and discovery, slowly peeling back the layers of time. Visitors will once more walk the ancient streets, forming their own unique, personal connections to the past. And perhaps somewhere, a child, enchanted by a story of the city frozen in time, will be inspired to become an archaeologist, a historian, or a storyteller, continuing the vital chain of remembrance that keeps Pompeii and its people vividly alive in our collective imagination. The enduring story of Pompeii, of life brutally interrupted, of ordinary moments made extraordinary through unforeseen preservation, of profound human vulnerability and astonishing resilience, reminds us, gently yet powerfully, to appreciate the fragile, fleeting beauty of our own daily existence. Like the Pompeians on the fateful morning of October 24th, 79 AD, we cannot truly know what tomorrow may bring. We can only endeavor to live our days with purpose and meaning, tending our gardens, creating our art, loving our families, building our communities, and leaving traces that may, in ways we cannot possibly imagine, speak eloquently to the future. As our journey through Pompeii comes to a close, we leave the ancient city to its quiet slumber under the watchful stars. The streets that once echoed with vibrant Roman voices now whisper with profound memories. The homes that once sheltered lively families now shelter history itself. The lives that were so suddenly and violently cut short have, in a different, unexpected way, been extended far beyond what their owners could have ever imagined, teaching us, moving us, connecting us across the vast, daunting expanse of time. And as we drift towards sleep ourselves, let's carry with us the gentle, poignant reminder that Pompeii so generously offers, to appreciate each ordinary, precious day, to recognize our undeniable kinship with those who came before us, and to find deep meaning in the comforting knowledge that though individual lives may be brief and finite, humanity's grand story continues, linking past, present, and future in an unbroken, eternal chain of shared experience. The ancient Romans had a solemn saying, memento mori, remember that you will die. But Pompeii adds a vital, complementary truth. Remember also that something of us remains, that the small, seemingly insignificant moments of our lives may, through serendipity or design, speak volumes to future generations in ways we cannot possibly predict. This is perhaps Pompeii's most profound and luminous gift, not just a meticulously preserved window into a distant past, but a shining mirror that reflects our own humanity back to us, encouraging us to deeply consider what traces we will leave behind, what stories will be told of us when our own chapter in history's immense book has finally closed. With that evocative thought, we leave Pompeii to the watchful, patient presence of Vesuvius and the gentle, enduring light of the very same stars that shone on the city in its vibrant prime, witnessed its horrific destruction, and now, millennia later, illuminate its extraordinary afterlife as one of humanity's most powerful reminders of all that we share across the centuries. Our dreams and our fears, our joys and our sorrows, our boundless capacity for both creation and destruction, and our enduring, fundamental need to connect with one another across the magnificent, fragile bridges of time.